All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Pressing Forward podcast. Today, I've got with me Evan Nolte. He's a United States Army Staff Sergeant paratrooper. I've been following him on Instagram. He's a canine medic, if you will. That's the way that I would coin it. And everything I see, he's doing some awesome stuff out there, and he's here with us to share his story today. So, Evan, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, of course. I'm a big fan of what you do because it's like a something you don't normally see. It's like at least for me, I don't follow. The only other dog person that I know is like Mike Ritlin, and that's because of like who's like huge into it. And I don't even know if
Yeah.
he practices medicine, but I'm sure the guy knows plenty of stuff about dog medicine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because he does the Warrior Dog Foundations. That's another an organization that helps rehome. Because there are certain dogs that are just too aggressive or to be adopted kind of safely to the general public if their handler can't take them. So there's a lot of other veterans doing canine stuff. Um, I just primarily doing the med stuff, and I do work with some nonprofits. But I just had a lot of unique kind of canine medical experience for my military career. So as I left, because medically retired, trying to kind of pass some of that on, especially in the law enforcement community, where I when I because when I was medically retired, I got the benefit of an internship through the Special Operations Fund Soft Care Coalition, um, and so I was able to kind of see through the canine nonprofits, the law enforcement, they didn't really have the same resources or training or background of experience in terms of treating their dogs if something bad happens to them. Because a lot of times, that officer is it's kind of going to be on them if their dog's shot or stabbed. They're going to have to try to treat them on the scene and get them to a hospital.
Yeah, so like you're out there giving that good knowledge about the stuff that you've learned to be able to, obviously, who doesn't want to save a dog? I mean, if there's somebody out there that's shooting and stabbing dogs, I think the person should deserve quite the beating.
Yeah,
But being able to
yeah,
give, to be able to give the officers, that are understaffed, undertrained, or just don't have the funding to be able to do stuff like that. It's a pretty cool thing to see, making an impact after your time in service. But we'll get into all that. I really do love what you do. That's awesome. I have a chocolate lab and a husky, so not that they're working dogs, but
yeah.
I love dogs. So yeah, where are you from? Where do you grow up?
So originally, I'm from New Zealand. I was born in New Zealand. I lived there till I was around 13, and then moved to the United States in 1998. And I've been here ever since. Obviously, and I spent most of my life in Washington State. Even 10 out of the 14 years that I served was at Fort Lewis, Washington. So luckily, I didn't join the army to leave my hometown because I didn't really. But now I'm all over the place traveling and teaching.
Yeah, nice. What was that life like growing up in New Zealand and then coming to America? How was that transition for you?
It was weird because I remember there was just like little things like they didn't have root beer in New Zealand, so I thought root beer. I would drink root beer until I got sick because it was the
Yeah.
greatest thing in the world. Not having had it like as a kid, as well as the cereal aisle, man. Because I think it was 12, 13, yeah, 13 years old. And in New Zealand, there was like six. There's more now, but at the time there was like six different kinds of cereal. And I think the only one they really imported from the United States was Fruit Loops. So I go, get to the US and go to the cereal aisle here, and there's just so many cereals. Like, how do you pick one when
Yeah.
there's like 100 different, and they're all, and honestly, they're all just kind of sugar at the time. So as a kid, big fan of coming to America and getting all kinds of sugary American cereal.
Yeah, that's I mean, even now is like I have kids, but like walking down the cereal aisle is like quite the nightmare. It's like they know what they like, but they go down and every time they see something new, they want to grab a different box in exchange for what they already have. So, I can understand how you felt as a kid
Yeah,
because I've seen
at
it. I mean,
least
I was the same way. I mean, change up your cereal all the time.
glad it wasn't just me. I was like, oh wow, look at this, like the mecca of cereal here in America.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I feel like some uh I was just going to bring up some. I try not to get political with things. I was going to say something and just not
No,
even
no
worth it.
respect.
Yeah, but it's not the point of this. But once you got to the States, 1998, so a couple years in, obviously you're living in the United States when 9/11 happens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was in high school. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it would have been like first freshman in high school.
Okay.
So I
Uh,
remember my mom waking me up and turning on the news and see like I think I watched the second plane hit the towers or hit the tower when I was freshman in high school.
yeah, because that's you guys are on the east or the West Coast, and obviously you got that.
Yeah.
So, you're early in the morning. That's going on. Yeah, that's crazy. What kind of impact did that have on you? Did you, I don't know, think something initially when you saw that?
I remember like not just kind of feeling surreal, like not really at first because I thought it was an accident. So I remember that. And then seeing the second plane and then, being 15, 14 years old and thinking, like just kind of not I don't think I really fathomed at the time the idea of like terrorism or someone intentionally crashing planes into buildings to kill Americans or anybody.
Right, right, exactly. And I mean, at this point, did you consider yourself like, had you already, I mean, how does that work when you're a kid, when your parents move from another, or were your parents American just living in New Zealand or,
So my mom was American. My dad was a New Zealander. So when
okay,
they got divorced, and then so my mom took my brother and I came back to the States.
gotcha,
So my
gotcha.
dad's side of the family still lives in New Zealand.
Okay, so did you consider yourself like a full, like, did you have dual citizenship when you were born
Yeah,
then? Because mom was okay.
yeah.
But at this point, 3 years in, like you're a freshman in high school, do you consider yourself pretty American, or you hold that Kiwi pride at that point in time?
So actually, I had a New Zealand accent, and I remember because I always thought kids were mocking me because I'd go to school, came here, started school, and they'd always ask me specifically like great white shark. I had like this one teacher like I didn't say great white shark, and so I honestly made an effort to start sounding like everyone else, so people would stop asking me to say stuff. They didn't really get it. Um, Obviously later, and I found out in hindsight it would have been better for me to have just kept the accent. It probably would have gone away eventually, especially moving kind of young. But I definitely still like, especially rugby, big fan of rugby. So it's kind of a necessity as a New Zealander. But I was kind of consider myself an American at that point. I'd come to America as an American. I even remember it's kind of interesting. You think back, not like to avoid politics, but just everyone was handing out American flags. I remember we got to school and teachers were putting on American flag pins and all that stuff the day of and after the day after the attacks on 9/11.
Right, so they're handing out all this stuff to the kids. Everybody seems pretty patriotic. Um,
Yeah,
did you see now? I know that there was. I don't know if this was while you were still living in New Zealand or maybe a little bit after. There was that like guy that went on like a shooting rampage or something on that island of students or something. I'm pretty sure that happened in New Zealand, didn't it? It was in like the 90s or maybe it was in the 2000s after you'd already come to the States.
I remember there was a shooting in New Zealand. Um, it feels like it wasn't that long ago, but it might have been. But I think they were shooting at I think they were shooting at mosques
Oh, that
at
that
the
was yeah,
time.
that
Yeah,
was that was not too long ago. That was in like
yeah.
2000 something. I would just wonder like after I think 2015 or 2016 that happened, that mosque shooting. But I thought that there was like a shooting that happened. Somebody went onto an island full of like kids that were parliament or like government or political kids are on like a retreat, and then some dude went onto an island and shot. I wish I had a Jamie like Joe Rogan does to
Yeah, I
look
was
the
gonna say
stuff up because I feel
fact.
like yeah, I feel like you know uneducated if that's incorrect, but I'm pretty sure
I
that that
think
did happen.
that might have been Norway,
Oh,
but
okay,
I don't
okay.
remember.
Yeah, I
I don't
think you know
remember.
what? Yes, I do. You're right. I think it was Norway. Some guy won't took a boat, whatever. So yeah, I was mistaken there. But I was gonna correlate that with obviously not as impactful or detrimental as 9/11 in terms of people that were lost. But I was gonna say, in the terms of the patriotism in a country, if there's like an event like that, if you would have seen any similarities, or if in America you see this, obviously horrible incident happens, this terrorist attack, and you see how patriotic everybody turns the day after the incident, you know. So
Yeah.
um, that's what I was gonna couple that with, but fuck that all up. So yeah, you guys get all the American flags and stuff. You see how like what kind of impact did that have on you when you see all this, you know, patriotism start to show up after 9/11?
I mean, I kind of joined in. You know, I was a weird like punk rock kid in high school. I had green hair at one point. I was in a Misfits cover band. We weren't very good. I think we thought we were good, but we weren't very good. You know, I
Yeah.
skateboarded everywhere.
Isn't that the
Even
point
I,
of
you know,
punk rock? You know, like
yeah,
that's
it's not supposed to be good. It's supposed to be fast and loud. Um, and so even like on my punk rock, you know, jacket, you know, I had my American flag pin and lapel and would, um, yeah, you know, it was kind of everyone seemed to rally around the flag after that happened.
so what was it that compelled you or like got you starting to think about the military? So this happens freshman year, you're still running around with like a green mohawk that's like, you know, almost a foot tall, doing
Yeah.
kick flips over the train station
Yeah.
3 set and stuff. Um, what what was it that like churned your mindset and like changed you to think about the military?
So I didn't actually join until 2007 and I graduated in 2005.
Okay,
And so I moved out when I was 17 because my mom took a job and I was like right there. It's actually I don't know how common it is, but in Washington at the time you could do like community college for your junior and senior year. So I did that.
nice.
And so you know, I was right at the verge of graduating. So I just moved out. And then after I finished my high school degree diploma through the community college, I got a job in a steel was structural steel factory in like um, South Seattle, where it was mostly just grinding stairwells and painting stuff and learned how to weld. I didn't really have a plan, you know, still kind of a punk rock kid. And then I think, you know, one day I'd have to get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to get to work because work would start like 5 a.m. We'd usually get off around 2 because it'd get too hot in there with all the welding and everything going on.
Yeah.
It was all structural steel. I think I had like flash burn for like, I don't know, the 10th time. And I was like, you know, just coughing up black iron dust. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this forever. I'd look at the old like salty guys I worked with, like this isn't a long-term plan. So then I started thinking about you know, what I would want to do. And I had another buddy, another close friend, still a great friend. So we just ended up thinking like, well, we should go. What if we joined the military? And I actually tried to join the Marines first, but it's funny because I had tattoos already, not as many as I do now. But I went to the Marine recruiter, and they're like, "Well, you have too many tattoos for like we can't even get you a waiver."
So what, are you like sleeved up at this point, or are you like
I
close to
had just like one sleeve or down. It was this forearm was like
blasted
not like it
out?
is now, but it
No.
was like it was enough on the forearm. They're like, yeah, you can't.
You like can't cover it with like the
Yeah,
single hand, so
yeah,
your
yeah,
PT stand. Yeah, I know. I know.
yeah. And but it was funny though. He's like, but he said, don't worry, we won't take you, but we know who will. And so he walks me down to the army recruiter. And sure enough, they took me. Yeah, especially 2007, you know, like the surge and everything. They're
Oh
like, yeah,
yeah.
just sign here, man. We'll send you.
So
You go wherever you want.
when you enlisted, what excuse me, what was it that you signed up to do when you enlisted?
So it was to be an animal care specialist, is what they called it. Because my granddad, my mom's side of the family, American, he was in the army for 21 years, and he was a volunteer. He volunteered for Korea, and then he volunteered for Vietnam twice. And he was in ordnance and artillery, and he never really talked about the war at all. Like I remember when I was a kid, I would ask him, and he would just kind of pretend like he didn't hear me. And I didn't. Now I know, like in retrospect, he just because I asked him like 2 or 3 times, and then I would just kind of drop it. But the one story he would tell is he had a cousin in Vietnam that was a dog handler, had a dog named King, and so he'd tell this story about King. He was driving a Jeep. He went to go find his cousin. You know, asked some guy that was holding his. He drove onto this camp. Was like asking for where the other Sergeant Nolte was, or and then the guy was like, I don't know where he is, but you know, his fucking dog just bit me. And so that was how he found him, was that King So it would be my, I don't know, second cousin, first cousin once removed, however that works. Another like relative that was in Vietnam. It was a dog handler. Found his dog bit some guy, and my granddad went and found him. That was the story he would tell. It's really the only story I heard from his at least war stories. He would tell like some of the funny stories from garrison training stuff. And I never realized that probably had a lot to do with why I went to the recruiter and I was like, hey, I'd like to work with military dogs. And they said, well, you can be an MP, but there's no guarantee you can be a dog handler.
Right.
And I didn't know much about the army, but I knew enough about it that I was like, I don't think anybody likes MPs. I don't want to be an MP. Like that sounds like a terrible choice. And I've got tons of MP friends now. They're all great people, not judging them. But at the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So they said there's this, you could, take care of the military dogs. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Sign me up.
Nice. So what did you go like ship right away? Did you go off to basic training or how do you have to wait a
I
little
think
bit of time?
I had to wait a month, I think, the delayed entry program thing.
Yep.
Um, Waited about a month, then went to basic Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which I'd never been to Missouri before. I don't know that I would go
Go
back
back.
again, at least not to Fort Leonard Wood.
No, there's some solid
And
spots in Missouri. I've been a few solid
yeah,
spots.
yeah. And then from there, I went to Fort Sam Houston because we have, our advanced individual training after basic training. And that's where like the home of Army medicine is. I think it's a joint base now. So most like corpsmen, Air Force medics, everyone's trained there. So the AIT there, I think it's about 13 weeks. And then I went to my first duty assignment, which ended up being Fort Lewis, Washington. It's a
Nice.
62nd Med Brigade. That was interesting because then I got there and the veterinary unit was being forward deployed and I was being left in the rear. So then I remember I don't know, I'd only been there at the unit for a few months and the brigade sergeant major wanted to see Private Nolte in his office. I was like, oh man, I don't know what I did. I just got here. I know nothing. This seems terrible. So I went, met the sergeant major, and he was like, I remember he's like, well, what do you do? So I'm an animal care specialist, sergeant major. So and I don't know what I do, right? I'm brand new in the army. Like I have zero experience, authority, or anything to be like, this is what I do. So that I take care of military dogs because I'll never forget because he goes, I don't have any dogs in my brigade. And I didn't know what to say to that. I think I just said, yes, Sergeant Major, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what you want from me. Just a, just a 20-year-old private. And he said, well, so you can do everything a medic can do. And like, again, I don't have any experience to say yes or no to that. But I was like, yeah, I can. He's like, you can do IVs, you can stop the bleeding. And again, I think I can. I got out of training, but so I said yes. He's like, well, I'm short on medics. So he sent me an EMT course that they had at Madigan Army Medical Center at the time. And then to a combat lifesaver course, so the EMTB, CLS, and then they sent me to an FLA, a four-liter ambulance. And then I just did like training coverage as like being used as a medic in that thing, primarily we had the LDAC or Warrior Forge, where they'd have all the ROTC students would do their kind of basic training at Fort Lewis at the time. And so I was just kind of, I didn't see an actual military working dog for probably the first like 8 to 9 months of my like once I was done with training, until I was able to ask my sergeant at the time. He let me go over to the veterinary hospital that was on McCord and start kind of working with them so I could actually do, see
Like your
military working
job.
dogs.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's that's
do my job.
I mean that's crazy that even in the first place that they would send you to a unit like knowing your MOS, or is that what you guys call it in the Army, MOS?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so your MOS is to work with military working dogs, and they send you to a unit that doesn't have like that's mind-boggling that even
That's
happens in the
good.
first place.
Well, it's like the career field for 68 Tango or animal care specialist is in the veterinary service is kind of interesting because it's kind of split into three parts. There's veterinary treatment, and there's four kind of now. There's veterinary treatment facilities, or like the MTFs or the hospitals, that support the dogs that are stationed with usually the MP garrison or any dogs that are in that kind of area. So if the dogs need routine checkups and they need surgery, something happens during training, we transport them there. There's the field or numbered units. So those are the detachments that will forward deploy and set up kind of like with the combat support hospitals or the caches. And so they had that numbered unit or that field unit there, but then since they were forward deployed, there wasn't
Oh,
many.
right. Okay,
It
gotcha.
just wasn't. They had left like one. There was one other veterinarian because she was pending med stuff, so she was kind of left in the rear. And I think too, just at the time, the sergeant major was like, "Well, I have this guy doing nothing, and I'm short on medics. If he can do all that stuff, we'll get him certified and just use them productively." But
Gotcha.
I very much wanted to work with the dogs.
Right. That's, I
It's
mean,
just kind
that's
of,
why you did it, you know.
yeah, right, yeah,
Um, so during that 8, 9 months that it took you to go from completing your AIT to seeing a dog or whatever, like what were you doing? You go out to the field in an ambulance and make sure
yeah,
guys are training, like if they fell out of a hike or they got an injury, like you guys just sustain them
yeah,
and bring them back to the hospital.
yeah, pretty much. Like,
Gotcha.
had a had a guy had a kid, our ROTC guy. We had to call them warriors. I remember that. You couldn't call them cadets. Like call them. It's just
You're,
like
you're like
yeah,
sitting in there and some kid's like, oh, my knee.
yeah,
He's like, there's no swelling or anything. He just doesn't want to
yeah.
hike anymore.
Well,
Uh,
I started fucking with the cadets, the warriors, a lot because we were just kind of getting bored. And at one point, because really all we had to do was hand out the flu packs and like give them moleskin because they didn't broken in their boots before they came to this thing. And then they were putting the moleskin on wrong. So then the cadre was like, the medics will put moleskin on for you. And for me, I'm like, no one put anything on my feet when I was at basic training, like I just dealt with it myself. What do you
right.
mean? Like we have to put moleskin on for them. So I used to give them the option. I'd be like, listen, man, I'll give you the moleskin. You can put it on. They're like, well, no, they told us you have to put it on. I'm like, okay, I'll repeat myself. You have two options. I can put it on or you can put it on. It's your choice. But if I put it on, it's probably not, like
Yeah,
this is
it's not
silly.
gonna,
And
you're
like,
slapping it on.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
going on nice.
Well, what I ended up doing is they're like, well, you put it on. So I'd cut it into the shape of a big dick and just put all these like dick shaped bandages on all these
That is
cadets.
awesome.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. So that got noticed. Like, you have to stop making dick shaped bandages. I'm like, why can't they just put it on their own feet?
Yeah,
You
you
don't
got some
need
like
someone.
stink. There's always somebody that doesn't shower or doesn't take care of their feet, and you're touching
Yeah.
some grody, grimy, stinky feet. Like,
Yeah.
no, thank you. I'm good.
And then I had a kid that it was actually pretty, because Washington State doesn't generally get that hot. We were covering the U.S. weapons range, so there was familiarizing them on crew serve weapons and stuff. And it was like a 90-degree day, so they told them to like make sure when they clear it, like lift the tray up, make sure they keep their head down, right, and then sweep the tray so no like rounds cook off. And this kid, for whatever reason, lifted the tray up with his face and just had a round cook off right into his face. And I remember because I put a chest seal on him. It wasn't probably didn't need it, in hindsight, but it's what did I know at the time? So he had all these penetrating trauma into his shoulder and like around his um, collarbone and stuff. So just put a seal on it and drove him to Madigan Army Medical Center where he was fine. But
Yeah, but you never know. I
mostly,
mean, even up there, like
yeah,
through a lung, you get any puncture, like
yeah,
anything in that area of the body, like you get tension pneumothorax, and you're not doing so hot
yeah.
when lungs not working the other is.
And
Uh,
then little thing, like we had a guy, had another cadet warrior. He tripped and decided that there was this C wire on the training lane, on the sticks lane he was at, and he thought like grabbing onto the C wire was the best way to pull himself back up, and
mm,
uh, that wasn't the best way to do that.
no.
So I was really just bandaging up. His hand was just flayed open,
Oh, I was
just
thinking like
little,
how bad that's gotta fucking hurt though, like
yeah,
those little paper
yeah,
cuts. Imagine like, oh, no thanks.
yeah. It was gnarly. Just like, yeah, so mostly stuff like that, and then I
But still, you got
just
even that though, right there, you're getting a little bit of experience. It might not be like treating and sustaining casualties in combat, but you're getting some of these wounds that like, I mean, you got a deep laceration or something that's, you've got to either pack the wound or, wrap it tight enough to stop it from bleeding. And you've got like, like a possible sucking chest wound or something. So you're applying chest seals, like you're getting into, what I would assume like some of the things that you're going to see down the road at a different
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah. I'm grateful for having that kind of, because it not only did it give me kind of a frame of reference for a lot of stuff I wouldn't have otherwise, but even just operationally in the Army, a lot of Army veterinary personnel don't get that much. If they spend their whole career in an Army treatment facility, because I was also did supported fire missions for the fire the artillery brigade, so we'd pull our little ambulance up and cover the fire line, and that I remember that because it's actually the only place in the Army they have gunnery sergeants. It's like the E7 and an artillery battery. They call him gunny. And this gunny, he hated medics. He didn't hate them, but he's like, you guys are lazy. You're just sleeping in there, which is true. But I mean, like
Typical.
that was our
Yeah, it's
job. Yeah,
fucking
I mean,
typical.
we don't like unless there's something for us to do, we can just hang out in here until you yell for a medic. But he used to have me after every fire mission. This is just training, but every fire mission, he'd be like, "Doc, go police the line." So I just have to walk to every gun, and the guys in there be like, "What do you keep coming back here?" I'm like, "Gunny wants me to check on you guys after every time you shoot the gun. I don't know why, but." And honestly, I'd usually just give them my smelling salts from my aid bag. Like, hey, you got any smelling salts? Because they would like to fuck with each other when they fell asleep. And that was pretty much
That's
the
good.
extent.
That's good.
But I got familiarity with that, with like how an artillery battery works. They let me shoot pull the lanyard a couple times. So it was a pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience getting to do all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for being introduced to it, in that way of one getting around, obviously firing artillery, you're exposed to, I don't know, some of the explosive, like some people never experience that or the sound, what that sounds like until they maybe get forward deployed or something, and put in a situation where they've never had any experience with any wounds or, being around even gunfire. Some corpsmen are just so they might come from the hospital and haven't shot a gun in who knows how long, and they've never, let alone being around like a tank or a piece, like an artillery piece or something.
And I thought the coolest thing was, if you're like on the side of the gun, you can't see that round, but if you're right behind the gun, I mean, you can watch that round go for a while. And I don't know why, but I always would try to watch the round as it like took off until you couldn't see it anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've never been in like an artillery battery before, like the position, see, like always they've always put fire down for us, so never
Yeah.
from that initial side, but it's pretty cool. I didn't know you could see, like
Yeah.
once it's fired, you can, and you're talking like howitzers, like 155s or what?
Yes. 155s. And you could like just how fast that thing moves. Just if you're right behind the gun and you like catch it, you can follow kind of like a golf ball. You can follow its trajectory
Gotcha.
for a bit before it kind of like hits the apex and then it's gone. But
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Um, so you go through that little bit of time in the field and getting a little bit of these, experiences. What is it then now when you go to the canine sector, the veterinarian hospital? What's that like?
That was cool. I remember we're friends. I still know him, but the very one of the very first military dogs I ever saw was a ranger dog named Thor. And that guy, that ranger is now the trainer for Second Ranger Battalion. And so it's in the hospital, right? But we have to put a IV catheter in Thor for a procedure. And Thor was not a very friendly dog. He was to his handler, but not. So I think it took around 4 rangers to hold Thor down for me to try to put an IV in him. And again, I'm not like, I wouldn't say I was super proficient at the time at doing any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
What kind of
and my
dog
wife
is
kind of like,
this? What kind
he
of
was
dog is this?
Thor was a German Shepherd.
Okay.
Um,
So big
and then
old
like
German Shepherd freaking get
big old,
your first experience of like doing this with some
yeah,
like actual working dog.
yeah, big old Ranger dog. And then, I had all the kind of previous treatment stuff I had done had been on soldiers, which it's really easy to tell another soldier, like, even if they're in pain or like, they're being a baby about it, like, hey man, just sit down, like, shut up. You're going to be fine, but you're going to have to, this is happening. But, the dogs, they don't like, hey man, fuck you. I don't want you to do anything to me. You're going to have to earn it. And like, so I just remember thinking, as I'm watching these rangers struggle to hold this one dog down, like four big strong rangers trying to hold down 170-pound dog, and be like, dude, if they're all like this, I don't know how I'm gonna do my job. Like, how am I gonna pull this off? Luckily, they're not all They weren't all like Thor. There were plenty that were. Um, but then I ended up kind of enjoying part of that kind of challenge of you have to be fast, you have to be good because you may only get one shot to kind of pull something off before the dog. So they're quick. They associate, they learn fast. Like if you get that window or that opportunity to pull off an IV or to get that bandage on, it's gonna, they're gonna know the next time you try to do it kind of the same way. So it's not like, you like seeing the dogs injured, but I guess the difference between treating people and the dogs that I kind of found that challenging, like you just have to be really proficient if you're gonna try to pull it off, and looked at it a way to like, how can I make sure that you can pull it off so you're not missing that opportunity if the dog's not cooperating.
So you're saying that you've got to like kind of change up your avenue of approach, if you will,
Yeah,
for every time you're treating the dog. Like you might wrap a wound on its left hind leg, like a certain way, like having it held, and then you like wrap, but you have to change it up every
yeah,
single time because they'll notice. What do they try to like reach back and
yeah.
bite you or slip out of it or what is?
Yeah, like, if you kind of grab their leg, and you're just holding it there, and then like wait till they kind of settle down, then you go to get a venipuncture, put a needle in them. If you miss or you don't, it's going to be a lot harder to do that again. At least right then and there. Like once, and it's every dog you do can have to approach differently, and so much of veterinary medicine for veterinarians and technicians in a hospital as well is, like nothing. There's always the textbook, there's always how things you'd like things to go, but really the animal is dictating kind of how you have to adjust
Yeah, and
what
that's
you're able to do.
Yeah, I'm sure that changes with like breed and size and how big the dog is or how well
Yeah.
trained or whatever the dog may be. When you're here, like who's advising you and like who's overseeing you while you're doing this? Or are you kind of just like thrown into this environment on your own and just start going to work?
I got a lot of I think I got a lot of leeway as a junior enlisted soldier just because I think the sergeant I had at the time, um, he kind of recognized that I wanted to do stuff. I didn't just want to kind of like fuck off and do nothing. So I'd have to go back to the field unit, like the cache that fell under the med brigade back on Fort Lewis, the field brigade. But I think it was like 2 or 3 times a week. Like motor pool Monday, because I tried to get out of motor pool Monday, but that wasn't going to happen. So on Mondays, I'd have to be back at the brigade, or PMCS, all our Humvees that we never moved and we're always deadlined.
Yep.
But then the rest of the week, so I think I'd kind of have to check in Monday, Friday, but then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I would call them or check in and be, hey, I'm going to be at the treatment facility. And then the staff there, even though I didn't belong to them, they would just kind of throw me into the clinical rotation kind of thing. I'll be on surgery, I'll be helping with this dog.
No
So
shit.
I was able to learn um, a lot of that clinical medicine stuff to go through that, which then led to me calling. I don't know if it's in the Marines, but in the Navy, I know they call them their detailer. For the Army, it's like human resource command. So I called, my MOS's kind of the assignment manager and just said I would,
Yeah.
because I would have stayed there my whole 4 years, my first enlistment, and so like I would like to go somewhere else that has a bigger dog population or be able to treat dogs. So she gave me the list of available assignments, and then I picked Virginia and was actually stationed. So that's the thing too, is the Army is the executive branch, or it's the only branch of the military that has medical personnel. So, but every branch uses dogs, obviously. So I went from the Army to the Navy, and worked. I still worked. I had a captain that was a veterinarian. He was Army, but we worked kind of for the Navy and Marine Corps for the 3-ish years I was there. And that's actually when I started. I worked with the Marine IDD program there. I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember that program. So at one point, just with the way, the military, I think there was just under 800 Marine IDD dogs. This had been around 2010, 11,
Yep.
12. And so myself and one captain were kind of the med support for that whole program, which would be nuts because we might see 50 of these Marine detector dogs in a day. So it'd be me and him would work from like 5 a.m. till 10, 11
Shit,
p.m., sometimes
son.
later. Um, but then it was cool because I got exposure to the Marines and that program.
Yeah. Well,
And then
did you ever go to 29 Palms, or was it just on the East Coast in Virginia?
it's just on the East Coast.
Okay, for sure.
I've been to 29 Palms later on just for training. It's not
Gosh,
somewhere I'd like
okay.
to, another place I wouldn't like readily go back to.
Yeah, no, I think anybody
Or,
would attest to that, but I just
yeah.
was curious if like it, because then that time period, that's when, I'd been deploying to Afghanistan, so I didn't know if,
Yeah.
because we obviously had, uh, ours were all Labradors. We had all Labradors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
That was actually, I remember the first and only Labrador that ever bit me was a Marine IDD named Rooster. And he was just a big, he was jacked, this big
he
jacked
was a
lab.
machine gunner, dude. He was a fucking
Yeah, he
machine
was.
gunner.
He was a
Yeah,
miniature guy. And
yeah.
then, like it was a lab. So I think they asked me, they're like, "Do you want me to put a muzzle on him?" I'm like, no, it's a lab. He'll be fine. But he wasn't. Rooster, Rooster, I want to say I was taking his temperature, which I can respect, because dog temperatures are taken rectally, and
Yep.
he didn't like that. So yeah, he just like out of nowhere, just wham, like hit me, and I was like, I was not expecting that.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure you've been bitten by dogs a few times now, like
yeah,
doing what you do. Yeah.
yeah. Had
All right.
a couple of holes that I wasn't born with from working with military dogs.
All right. Well, you did this stint, this 2 to 3 years in Virginia, working with the Navy and the Marine Corps and the IDD program. What was something that you got from that? Like, I don't know, maybe an impactful moment, something in leadership or something in yourself that you saw where you really started to take hold of, the things that you're understanding and doing.
I had a great captain and veterinarian, and he was new as well. So it's kind of wild to think, and I think that happens a lot. Two people kind of we're like he and I, because they kept putting up that like manning requests, right? Like, hey, we need more people. We have 798 dogs we're trying to support with two people. And it's also ironic and very military-esque because they sent those extra bodies after they shut the Marine program, that IDD program down. But so he not only did I think he needed the help, but so he taught me a lot of things that were kind of outside of my scope of practice, which would set me up later for what I did later in my career. Um, as well as I had the opportunity to work with naval special warfare a lot, and then I was there and helped with the initial, like the medical portion of the initial startup of the MARSOC canine program as well. Um, so it was neat because I started off with the Army and learning about a lot of Army things that I wouldn't have in my career field ordinarily with artillery and medic, being used as a medic, and then getting over to the Navy, meeting the Navy MAs, their dogs. I got some there. We had a ton of dogs. We had that Marine Corps population, the IDD population, that's obviously a huge Navy presence in the Virginia Beach area. So the Navy had probably 50-ish dogs for the MAs there, and they would do rotations to Afghanistan, mostly Afghanistan at the time. And then that was the first exposure I got to the special operations multi-purpose canine program. I mean, outside of, obviously that Ranger dog, those were special operations canines, but I didn't work with them. I wasn't really included in training so much as I was when I was in Virginia Beach. So
So
I think the
when
big
you were
things,
in the, sorry to cut you off, but I'm
no
just
worries.
curious, during this point in time, so you're probably what, 2 years in the Army when you initially start this venture on this time
Yeah.
in Virginia Beach. Are you exposed, like, did you train with Naval Special Warfare while you were in that, like actually running drills, or are you there just assessing the dogs at this point in time? And then that's the follow-on step. You know what I'm saying?
So, but yeah, it did. It was just kind of coming out to training and running medical support. Because like, yeah, come out to training, man. They're all awesome dudes. And then go to the kennel because that's kind of they had wanted their own kind of direct support, and they tried to move me over, but it just didn't work out. But so they brought me. There's at the time there'd be special operations canine conferences, so they'd bring me with them to those. And then also as it's kind of being invited out to training, doing medical support, but then being able to learn about the dogs, how they work the dogs, what they were doing, how they trained, what they did operationally, and then kind of getting included more and more. Like they're, hey, Evan, do you want to throw the bite suit on and decoy for us. You know, and then I think that, and then me, I'm like, yeah, sure, like, absolutely, let's do it. Which also I think because later on in my career, I was like, yeah, that's why they did that. Like I didn't, after a while, you're like, I don't really want to get chewed on all day, so I'll let someone else do that. And then even when they needed extra bodies just for training, because they train as a dog attachment, they may not have the support of the whole platoon. So if they needed extra bodies just to give dogs that sight picture for room clearing or CQB or doing building searches, so it get thrown in as another body for the stack and stuff. So again, just learning a lot of getting exposure to and learning a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have that aren't typical for someone in my career field that
Oh
had
yeah, for
spent all that
sure.
time
I
in a
mean
treatment facility.
that alone, just getting like a couple reps in and getting the footwork
Yeah.
down and like presentation and making entry and like even if you're the last man in the stack, still being able to pick up those skills because that I mean, dude, that's money right there.
Yeah, and I think so. I think yeah, I appreciated the investment people put into me, and then also kind of at that point I adopted a mentality looking at those last 2 4 years that you really can make um, a lot of it is what you make of it. Like if you can earn opportunities by doing your job and doing it like the best of your ability, and then the other opportunities present themselves where you can kind of continue to learn or get exposed to stuff that you may not otherwise. So that was kind of constantly
Yeah.
reinforced, whether it's luck of the draw or whatever. But it was that's kind of those first 3 4 years definitely were awesome. I mean, it was my whole career was awesome to be honest. But yeah, just kind of learning that like you get a lot of people that have like a negative attitude, like, oh, I'll never, I just didn't have that experience where um like I didn't have any time where I got like shut down or as I like kept getting opportunities and pursued more, there wasn't a whole lot of
Like
getting
no one was like there wasn't a lot of obstacles or hurdles in your
yeah.
way as you're going through there. So at this point in time, like you've had a um pretty solid experience in terms of the knowledge that you're gaining and gathering, the people that you're meeting and the opportunities that you're getting to have. So after that point where what's that next step then after you do through this your time in Virginia Beach?
So that was kind of like it felt like a setback, but it ended up being a good opportunity. Which I always try to remember, like sometimes it feels like you're getting set back, but you never know what's going to happen after that. And so with the MARSOC thing, I worked with them for maybe a month, and they wanted to have their own kind of direct medical support, like veterinary medical support. So they tried to move me from Virginia Beach down to Lejeune. Like I went and I interviewed with the colonel down there, and
And what are you like a sergeant at this point maybe?
I was a specialist as E4
Okay.
still,
Okay, so you're E4.
still an E4. But they had an army captain that was their command veterinarian, and he liked me. The gunnery sergeant of the kennel master liked me, and so they tried to move me down there. But what happened was the billet was supposed to be written as like a by name request, and then something got mixed up where it wasn't. It was kind of needs of the army. So the same like detailer, human resources specialist I talked to get to Virginia, they just ended up filling it with a random person because I'd only been on station for like 2 years, so I was ineligible to PCS according to them. This person um, was kind of notoriously difficult to work with for most veterinary enlisted, like in terms of assignments, and so they kind of fought that for a while because they ended up it was an airborne assignment, so you had to go to jump school, and they kept sending people that weren't able to go to jump school or wouldn't go through it. So they kept kicking them back and saying like they don't meet the requirements of the billet. Why don't you just give us the person we're asking for? But the detailer was determined to be like, no, you're not getting him. And then I thought for sure because it was a lot of drama. Like, oh man, like the detailer is going to send me somewhere really crappy. I was
Yeah,
convinced I
so
was going to
did you know this person? And I mean, I keep feeling like I'm
not
interrupting you, but I've got so many questions. Like, did this person know you like individually? Have you met this person before? They just
no.
had it out for you. You're fucking Like there's
They
something
were
about your.
just, it wasn't just me. It was, like you would bring them up to other veterinary personnel and they'd be like, oh man, like they're the worst. They just, if you ask for something, they'll give you the complete opposite, which was weird because they did give me Virginia when I asked. So like my initial experience with them was like, yeah, I'll
All
move you.
right.
But maybe that was like one and done. Like they'll do you one favor and after that you're whatever. But there was a lot of drama because like then the colonel from Marsoc was calling and complaining, and they were ultimately had no authority over the Army HRC. So I was like, I'm for sure going to Korea on a like unaccompanied year-long tour now. But they found what at the time I considered to be the only thing worse, and it was kind of dumb because the whole premise of me not being able to go be assigned to Marsoc was that I hadn't been on station long enough. But shortly after this debacle occurred, I came down on orders to an Air Force base in North Dakota.
Oh,
And I was like,
gee.
wow, I was like, yeah, it's Grand Forks, North Dakota. It's like the second coldest city in the United States of America, second only to Fairbanks. And I was like, oh, cool. They found like the one place that would be worse than just going to Korea for a year. But actually, ended up being pretty awesome because it was a lone duty assignment. So there was no veterinarian there. There was no other veterinary medical personnel. It was just me and the Air Force handlers. It was the 319th Security Force Squadron. So again, like I started off with the Army, then went to the Navy and Marines, and I'm going go to the Air Force. And this whole time for Army Medical, like the 68 series MOSs, there was during the GWAT, you could volunteer on a volunteer database for medical personnel to be individual augmentees on rotations to Afghanistan or Iraq. So my name had been on that list since I arrived in Virginia. I volunteered to deploy, but because of how many dogs we had there, they kept every time my name would come up for a deployment, they'd say, "Well, we can't send them because it's mission critical to the
Right.
current training mission." And so once I got to North Dakota, though, after about a year, my name came back up to the top of that individual augmentee list. And there was really no good reason for them to say I can't go now because I'm just by myself in North Dakota with some Air Force dogs. And so then 2013, so I spent 2012, I was there at the Air Force Base for like probably about a year, 2012-ish, like August through, and then 2013. So I deployed to Afghanistan ended up supporting the Army TED program, which was similar to the Marine IDD program. So it was
Okay.
the tactical explosive detector dogs and just
Nice.
infantry, basically Army infantrymen and Cav scouts that handled bomb dogs in Afghanistan for a rotation. So I deployed to Logar and Wardak. I was at Fob Shank for most of that travel around. And we had, so I lived was Camp Hellhound, lived in the dog kennel with these infantrymen and their dogs. And so again, got to do a lot more things and exposed to a lot more stuff that was kind of not the norm again for people in my career
Right.
field.
And now, I heard you. Did you guys not could they not come up with something more like I mean Hellhound is pretty close to Devil Dog, don't you think? I mean, you guys
Yeah, I mean,
they couldn't pick something better.
it was also,
I don't
there was no Marines on Camp Hellhound, but it
know.
was also a bulldog. So not only was
Oh,
it very
jeez.
similar to devil dogs, but there was a bulldog, which there were no bulldogs on Camp Hellhound. There was just shepherds. So
That's too funny. That is too funny.
Camp, but that was the name of the kennel there on Bob Shank was Camp Hellhound.
So what kind of shit were you guys doing? I mean, what kind of environment is it in 2013 in this AO in Afghanistan? Because I know there's still some kinetic areas in Afghanistan at this
Yeah,
point.
I remember that. That was actually when I first so I arrived as the individual augmentee to Bagram, and I was only in Bagram for like 2 days, which I like. Because I remember that like getting to Bagram in 2013 was nothing like what I thought the war in Afghanistan was going to be like. Because I'm like it looks like I'm flying into a city. There's a bus route. They're telling me that like if I'm walking on Route Disney or Disney Road, I've got to have my PT belt on. I'm like, this is just not what I thought war was going to be
Yeah.
like. But then they sent me forward to Fob Schenk. And I remember the commander was like, well, based on the history you have, uh, you know, being kind of a lone duty assignment, working on your own, and the experience you have, we're going to send you to Fob Schenk because I was the only animal care sergeant there. I remember because he said it's a very kinetic environment. And I'm like, I don't really know what that means, like, okay, cool. And then found out that they called Wiley Shank, like, was called Shrapnel City. And we just got rocketed all the time. Um, and then going from Bagram with like all the lights and the route and the bus route and the milkshakes and like just everything to Shank was a blackout fob and got mortared and rocketed and even had a big 2,000 pound V bid. So just very like getting kind of that same, like seeing how very different your experience can be, like
Right.
the
So
difference
in
of
in all
experiences.
this is all that's happening while you're at Fobshank, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then the dog teams, especially the dog teams I supported, were very successful. They found tons and tons of IEDs to the point where we ended up having taking down the signs for Camp Hellhound because the B doc,
They're looking for
yeah, so
places
they
to
they
target. Yeah.
yeah, they would have these spotters that came in. There was this hillside where they could just see over the Hescos, like into the fob. And we had in Pashto and Dari, like cautioned military working dog kennel, stay back along the perimeter of our spot, part of the fob. And I remember the battle captain called because I was a sergeant now. And at one point, I was one of the only, maybe we had like 3 sergeants on the compound. So it's kind of whoever. So the battle captain calls like, hey, we've done, the BD battle damage assessment and stuff. And if we look where they're plotting all these incoming indirect fire and like they're bracketing your compound and like the more IEDs those handlers find, the more they're trying to kind of hit you guys with these 107s and mortars and stuff. So we took all the signs down. Um, and and it went pretty well. Like we didn't have that was the first deployment with a dog named Max and his handler. His handler survived, but Max was killed. So had placed a hasty IED that they remote detonated as soon as the dog hit it on their way back from one OP to another.
Hmm.
And so, the first couple of months, was mostly guys were running missions, nothing major, just routine care stuff.
Right. Can
But
I want to ask about that situation because I think, people don't understand the type of connection. Well, I mean, obviously people, if you have dogs, your house pet, there's a huge connection. That's a part of your family. What kind of differences do you see? Because I want to correlate this to the incident that happened where this dog was killed and his handler survives, what kind of relationship do you see that's different between like a dog handler and their dog between just like having my chocolate lab, and he's just like
yeah,
my buddy.
I think, because I couldn't say for sure for everybody, but it's a really close, even for me, right? Like I lived with Max for from what was it, February or March of 2013 until he was killed in August of 2013. So it's just a dog that you know what they do, right? But they're still dogs. You still enjoy them. There's still a sense of normalcy and relief, right? We built a pool. It's a pretty funny story because we like stole the tarp from one
I
of
just
the another tent, yeah,
saw that.
and we like drove down in ATVs at night and took part of the tent from one of the combat support hospitals and went and somehow someone signed off on us getting lumber from the lumber yard and we built this whole pool. And so like when we were back at the kennel, like we're still training, making sure the dogs know how to find explosives, but they're just also um it's like not only those guys because they counted the dogs kept finding stuff, so it's reinforcing that like, hey, my dog keeps me safe, keeps all these other my teammates safe. um and then they also provide that kind of support, that like that moral support, them just being there, living with them, sleeping with them, eating with them, going on missions with them. So I know, I had a lot of dogs that I saw injured or killed, but they never, I considered them mine. Like I was there to take care of them and stuff, but it's not the same as for his handler that lost him.
Right.
I know because he has a son, and also 2 other guys were saved by Max, kind of eating that blast. Um, so it's just it's yeah, just having that. That's what the dogs are there for, and everybody knows that. But then once that happens, it's super. grateful. I know he's grateful to be alive, be home for his son, but still, there's got to be that kind of. I think there's a certain amount of moral injury, right? Because the dogs,
Oh, for 100%.
that's the hard part with the dogs, right? Is they don't know. They don't. It's a game. They don't know they're going to find bombs. They don't know. Um, when Max responded to that explosive that was placed kind of behind them as they're egressing back down the trail, his handler talked about like he immediately recognized that Max has detected a bomb that he didn't necessarily think would be there because he had already cleared that path
Right.
going in the opposite direction. And so he knew in that moment exactly what was going to happen. Like, so he was trying to pull Max back away from it, but they clapped it off. And so Max never knew that he was going to die.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
that's fucking unfortunate. But in like you said, that's what the dogs are there for. That's their job. They saved his handler's life and two other soldiers. But at this point, had you guys lost any dogs, or is Max the first one that you guys lose in combat like that? You like that you've been a part of as well,
that was the first. So there were other dogs that were lost on that tour, but I didn't live with those dogs.
Right.
I reviewed. It was stuff that you recognize as difficult, and um, you kind of I think disassociate at the time. So I'd review the footage of dogs that had been killed. Um, I'd received remains of dogs that had been killed. And I was there by myself when Max was killed. The veterinarian that I worked with, he had been pulled back to Bagram, and so I was kind of it for the dog's medical support. So I had to, when I I I bagged I, I bagged Max up, and so that was incredibly difficult for a dog that I'd been throwing a conch for the day before to
Yeah.
be putting um, ultimately kind of putting what was left of him into a black body bag.
Yeah, that's terrible. Or do you still keep in contact with his handler to this day?
Yeah, we don't talk um, probably as much as we should. He's a police officer now, actually, and but I keep in touch with most of those handlers from that deployment. And unfortunately, time keeps going. So it's been 10 years since, and those were, most of those dogs are about 2 years old when we were there, or older. So I think about the last dog that was still alive from that deployment passed, I think last month, not too long ago.
Yeah, it's like an overlooked thing, and there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of people out there that are, trying to make more of a note that there's these dogs have given their time in service. And one of my best friends, we did two deployments together. Uh, he had Doodle. He was a dog handler in 2010 and 2011, and Black Lab. And he actually got him after he had done another deployment to Afghanistan and been Chattanooga Police Department for like 5 years or something like that. So he got him. I guess he was like 9 years old, maybe when he got Doodle back. So that was pretty
Yeah.
cool that he goes back to his original handler after he had done all that time. And like he just recently, well, no, it was not recently, probably 2 years ago, I think he had to get put down. But um, yeah, definitely overlooked, man. And then the
Yeah.
sacrifice that's made. I mean, talking about Max, that seems like it is it still something that's impactful and like emotional for you when you bring that up?
Yeah. Yeah. Because Max was the first, um, the first dog that had kind of like I said, I lived and slept with those guys, and we hadn't lost any. So that was the first one that we did first, and
Yeah,
then having to kind of deal, and that was, there's just so much, and I think it's typical of just the military in general, right? Because his handler was an infantryman, so there was still what 4 or 5 months left on that tour, and so he didn't even get. He had, he took shrapnel, but it wasn't nothing major. Luckily, nothing major life threatening. They took the shrapnel out, and he didn't have to go anywhere. And because I remember, because again, I was one of the sergeants And so I didn't have like a good, the brigade combat team, the 4th Brigade combat team sergeant major, the command sergeant major for that infantry brigade. I tried talking to him because what he basically did was like, well, we still have a war to fight. And, his handler's an infantryman. He's going back to the line. And so I knew that was tough because not only did he just lose Max, but then he had been living and working with us in the dog detachment, not in the line company.
Right.
So not only did he lose Max, but like I think 2 weeks later, he's packing all his stuff up from Camp Hellhound and getting sent down to the infantry company that he's now going to be just back on the line for.
Yeah.
So he's still going out and doing presence patrols and route clearance and stuff without his dog that he lost. And there's a lot, because that is even it was great. They put a picture of Max up in the chow hall, right? They had all the soldiers that had been killed. And I get it, right? Like, and I don't think this is a common theme. Like most people have the same tremendous amount of respect for the dogs, even and especially ones that are killed. But there was a few soldiers in front of us in line of the chow hall that saw that Max's picture was on the table, like for the fallen as you go in the chow hall. And they started making comments about how they didn't think they weren't sure that a picture of a dog should be up with a picture of the other soldiers. But unfortunately for them, they didn't realize that they had the dog section standing right behind them in the chow hall, where then you have to kind of be a sergeant and like, okay, we're not going to beat these guys up in the chow hall line, but you really want to let everyone, they want to let them do that. Let the guys,
Oh, for sure, dude.
go for it, man. Swing on them. But, yeah, just so it's all that kind of, everybody loves the dogs, but then there isn't, unless you're working with them directly, they're there, but there's this kind of an unknown, like there's a certain amount of an unknown
Yeah, and I think that's
factor there.
and then also you have to think about it too, like that dog that could have been another soldier. That could have been
Yeah.
that handler walking
Yeah.
point with a fucking CMD or a Valen or whatever, and he's the one that gets taken out by that, IED. It's like what that dog sacrificed. It's that dog's life for those three soldiers to not be either lose both their legs or a leg and an arm or one of them be killed. That's
Yeah.
whatever. Everybody says and does stupid shit sometimes when they're young and they don't think about the disrespect or like the sacrifice or there's a lot of people say and do silly things when they're younger and they don't have
Yeah. I mean, I did. We all do.
yeah.
So, but just
Uh,
even that, just going through that whole kind of, even, with Max's remains, another thing that was difficult is I took Max's remains from the forward surgical team where it was received, and they had a morgue on Shank. And so I tried to one organize for Max to be cremated. But it was going to take, they gave him a hero. And that's again, so there's just contrast. There's not everybody. They do so much because Max got his own hero flight, flew his remains to Bagram where he was cremated, but it was going to take a couple of days to coordinate, or like the next day. This is night, it's nighttime. I remember it was dark because I remember I had my headlamp on, as I bagged up Max's remains. And so the staff sergeant for the morgue would refuse to put Max on cold storage because he was a dog. She wasn't going to put a dog into cold storage. And this is some of the stuff that's like, I don't know that his handler will listen to this, but I think we avoid maybe talking about some of it is, so I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do at this point. I don't know what I'm going to do with Max's body. So the best thing I came up with was we're not just going to leave Max sitting on the flight line, like in the heat in a bag. So we took him back to the team room at the kennel. And it wasn't a foolproof plan, but it was the best one I had because I'm like, I don't know what to do with his remains. And the medics and the FST were great. They brought me a flag. So we were able to put a flag over his remains. They helped me transport him back to the kennel. So, the little Chigo, I don't know if you had the little Chigo AC units. So we had like 3 of those in the team room. So we turned those down as cold as they would go. And then we put Max on a stretcher in the team room in the middle of the floor. And there's 3 couches around him at that point. So his handler slept on one couch. His handler's like one of the guys that his handler's closest to, that's still in the army, who he's actually is a Green Beret now. So him and then we slept there on those three couches. One so his handler wouldn't be alone. Um, but I woke up in the morning. We didn't really sleep, but at a certain point in the morning, right, the smell of decomposing flesh, right, that's permeating the entire team room because it's not cold enough for like the damage the Max sustained, just
Right.
decomposition setting in. And I think we all knew that we could smell that at this point, but no one really wanted to bring it up. And then later that day, we were able to bring Max down to the flight line where he was loaded onto two Blackhawks that they fired off the flares, the whole hero flight thing. And then his handler, I stayed behind, and then his handler and the other guy, the other handler that they were really close. They went up with Max to Bagram, where he was cremated ultimately up there, and then his remains were returned to his handler.
So he got to hold on to those
Yeah,
then. That's I like
yeah.
that. That's good to hear. Well, that's shit. That's obviously an impactful thing to see the level of. I mean, I don't know what you guys try to do the best thing that you could. And it's impactful in the sense that you're one there for the guy that the handler, and two, you guys don't just leave this dog that sacrificed itself for, these soldiers to be alive still,
Yeah,
sitting and rotting on the flight line.
yeah.
It's cool to see the way that they did that, flying him to Bagram and getting him cremated as well. Was that the only dog that you guys had lost on that deployment? Like
But
your kennel personally?
yeah, from that kennel, luckily, we lost others from different units that I knew, but not as well as Max, right? Because I've got video of
Right.
us
That was like I
swimming
saw
with
that
Max in
video.
that pool. Yeah,
Yeah, I saw that. That's pretty cool. At least you have that memory to hold on to as well. A lot of
yeah.
guys don't have like, videos and pictures and some stuff that with friends and guys that they served with even. So what's the rest of that deployment like after, because you said that's probably what, like 3 or 4 months in?
Yeah, it was August, so March, April, May, June, about 4 months in, and then it felt almost like after that happened, it just kept kind of going, and that was not having that frame of reference, right? Of seeing kind of how the fighting season picks up, especially as it approaches July, August, September into October as the passes freeze and they kind of pick up at the time anyway. So we had had a few more dogs that were unfortunately killed. Um, Mostly through explosive blasts or gunfire. Um,
Have you been
and
going
then
out on any foot patrols with these guys? Like, are you just strictly at
I
Camp
would
Hella?
fly.
You'd fly, okay.
I would fly out to the so we and because we also supported the surrounding sites. So there were special operations dogs there at the time, and so those were the other dogs that were kind of injured or killed a lot because they're being used for kind of the direct action
Right.
type stuff. Um, and so I would fly, pretty much fly everywhere
Okay.
to go
Now,
check the outlying sites.
yeah, and not that I'm trying to dive into your when you're going out to these different sites, different patrol bases or cops or wherever that you're going out to, and even being at Fob Shank, like, are there any times where, I mean, obviously you're getting rockets and mortared, but have you gotten in any engagements yourself? Have you had to like get up on post, like stand watch and be on like a crow system or something? Have you had the opportunity to do
Actually,
that?
I did do the crows class there, which I mean, it was just because I was like, again, because I tried to take advantage of if I can do it, I'll go learn. No matter, I'll go try it. So I did. I was like, there's probably no reason for me to know how to use a crow system, but I went to the class. I never used it. Um, I did have uh, I did have a rocket land and kind of throw me into a T-wall, or so I ended up getting a lot of hearing loss from because I was ultimately medically retired with traumatic brain injury. And I think that was probably, outside of playing rugby and stuff and getting punched in the face by dogs, playing the bad guy. But um, that came in. And then I remember, some hearing a tink and like some of the shrapnel fragment like hit over my head. And then my ear hurt really bad. And so that was, probably the worst thing that happened to me on that tour was just having a close call. And there was a
Well,
couple close calls with incoming and direct fire
yeah,
because that
yeah,
place was getting they would wake up most mornings. They're smart. I mean, they're dirt farmers, but they're not always dumb. They would kind of in the night set up all their like one of those 107 rockets or whatever they are, and then have those kind of photo sensor ignition like trigger systems. So as soon as the sun came up and uh, hit that solar or like kind of light sensitive thing, they would just start shoot. They'd be shooting into the base,
yeah. That's
and
we had washing machine timers or like the little
yeah,
spin timers that have those things set up, and they'd angle them. They'd stack rocks as
yeah,
like field goal posts almost, and just like try to aim it in whatever. So
yeah.
whenever we saw
So
those
like
fuckers, we took them down.
yeah, so we'd pretty much wake up every morning to depending, but anywhere from like 2 to 7 incoming rock. Got to the point, like people would like run to the bunker, but we'd just stay in bed
Yeah.
until because you're like, I mean, um yeah, it's either gonna you get so used to it kind of. But I think that was honestly having because later on my career going on having the opportunity to go on missions with Green Berets, um, it was still never nothing I think was ever as terrifying as when you look back. Everyone would kind of try to act tough, like you get used to it. I'm not running to the bunker; it doesn't bother me. But nothing was as terrifying as just having that incoming and direct
Oh,
fire because there is nothing you can do. It's either going to hit you or it's
I,
not.
IDF is terrifying.
Yeah,
Absolutely terrifying. Been a couple situations like that, and I don't think
yeah,
anybody enjoyed themselves.
no.
Um, so you go through this deployment, seems like almost unscathed. You've had some tough experiences that I'm sure that played, like they were traumatic, obviously exp going through and witnessing that. Um, was there anything else that you think is an impactful takeaway that you personally saw or experienced from your time on that first deployment?
I think I got because because you're an infantryman, right? You're a
Yep.
rifleman, and that's kind of like the Pogue thing. I remember the guys. I got a honorary non-Pogue certificate.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
But I
There you
think
go.
I got a pretty good appreciation for I think there is that disconnect between support personnel and like actual combat arms where those support personnel want to pretend like I'm just making a bit of a generalization, but I've seen it as well where it's like you really you really don't understand the difference until you're kind of like basically embedded in with these infantrymen and seeing what they have to do, what they're treated like, what's expected of them. Even with Max's handler, right? Like, hey man, yeah, your dog got killed, but guess what? You're going back on the line. Whereas you could have some, and I mean, even with me, right? There were some dudes when I got back to Bagram and saw some guy with a clean uniform, like double fisted milkshakes from the green bean. I didn't like him. I don't know
Yeah.
why I didn't like him,
Yeah.
but I was like, I don't know why you bother me so much, but just like you having,
Oh,
but having, you could have that guy that they're supporting support personnel, to say something like, "Oh, we're basically the same." It's like, no, it's really not, man. You're not the same. And there isn't. It's not a big deal. It's just that do your job the best you can, like what your job is. And so it's if it's supporting infantrymen, dog handlers, then do that. It's not. So again, getting kind of having that experience again and exposure outside of what would maybe be normal for someone that's ordinarily sitting in a treatment facility to kind of appreciate where that a lot of people get their feelings hurt. They get called a pogue, but it's just that's just the way it is.
that's the way it
Everyone picks their
is.
job. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone picks their job, and you picked yours. They picked theirs, and it's not the same. It's like it's not even worth. It is insulting to say that like, oh yeah, we're all. I mean, you're all soldiers or you're all Marines, but seeing seeing what those guys kind of had to go through for that tour, and getting the appreciation for it. Yeah, if you're sitting back in Bagram and working in an air-conditioned treatment facility, like just be grateful for that and do what you're doing well, but don't pretend like it's the same.
Yes, I totally agree with you in that aspect. It's a lot of people. I mean, I have plenty of similar experiences, like passing through Leatherneck or passing through Dwyer, or going up to some, like, even going from the patrol bases to the larger fobs, where it's like every person in the support staff is there. But even with that being said, and being myself being an infantryman, um, they say every Marine's a rifleman, and you kind of like look around,
Like,
you're like,
are they?
are they really?
Are
And
they
that
though?
doesn't take away from the fact that people like we have, you qualify for a rifle, or whatever. That gets a little off track. But I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm sure a lot of people do. But the one thing that I've tried to work on is looking past the fact that yes, they may have done what they did and I did what I did. Like you said, they signed up for the job, but not I used to be so salty and like have a chip on my shoulder about the fact that like, oh, you didn't fucking do what I didn't do. And it's like it, here we are, fucking 10 years, 12 years, however many years later. And now it just matters. I think we support each other, and we'll get into that and the things that you continue to do
Yeah.
outside of your service. But yeah, I feel like we have a lot to uncover still. So what is it like coming home from that first deployment in Afghanistan? Like, exposed to some of these things, like you're taking contact, getting rockets shot at you. You've had a couple losses. But here you are returning from that deployment. What's going through your head as you come back to the States?
It was rough. Actually, I did get shot at once because they would they would catch like they're called them jackals, but they look like foxes, these Afghan foxes, and they'd bring them to the kennel. And then, like, since I was the animal care specialist, right, or the vet support, it was like, well, you deal with this. And since it was Afghan native wildlife, I was supposed to just go release them, but I'd have to go outside the ECP to release them. So I go to release this fox, and like a gunfight breaks out, and I'm like, well, that's the last time I'm going outside the ECP to let
Did
a
you
fucking fox go.
did you have your
And
gear on? Did you have like a Kevlar and like a plate
yeah,
carrier and shit?
yeah,
Okay.
had to put like that shit on, but I still, I'm like, dude, I'm not getting shot because, like, how did you get, like, what the fuck were you doing? I'm like, well, I was letting this fox go because that's what you said, and then yeah, but it was tougher than I think I realized at the time. With hindsight always being 2020, I got back from the deployment, and I saw an individual augmentee. Um, I actually asked to stay because my tour didn't line up with those handlers. They had like 2 or 3 months left. So I went to like the med task force commander. So my commander was like, hey, I'd like to stay until they finish. But they wouldn't let me. They're like, you've already, I think in hindsight, they were like, no, it's, you've been through enough, or like you've done your part. It's time for you to go home. But I didn't actually want to go home. Um, and I was married at the time, it's my ex-wife now, and I think this all plays into that. So I got home, and I went from that to being back on that Air Force base in North Dakota, where I'm the
Oh,
only soldier there. And like, I had the handlers, they were great. Like, all the Air Force handlers came to the airport when I got home. They were all my friends. They were supportive. But I don't think I knew. Right, it's like you said, right. Everyone has different experience. Doesn't matter what you did. But I wasn't sleeping, and I just kind of chalked that up to, well, the time zone change, and I didn't sleep a lot on that tour, right? Because I had dogs that were or casualties that I would have to kind of stay awake for. Like, we would get them, and then I was a role two med facility. So they would come to me, and at one point that veterinarian, that captain, was gone. So it was just me. And so I'd have to take care of these dogs. And one thing it was always like huge fear was like, hey, if this dog that I need to monitor and give like medication to and treat, if I fall asleep on them, like,
and
I don't know what I would do. Whether I would be able to forgive myself for that. So started developing like unhealthy. I would do, kind of that trick where you hold your breath until you have an adrenaline dump. So it kind of wake you up and try to pay attention, right? Because I got to check his heart rate or his pulse and make sure he's give another blood transfusion or whatever it was. And so I get back home, and I was really distant. So my wife at the time, she kept asking. I didn't want to talk about it, so she kind of kept pushing, and I didn't want to talk about anything. And then I wasn't sleeping. And I did start going. I went to the sleep clinic. The Air Force had a sleep clinic, but um, they just kind of. I didn't really. I just I didn't really follow through. They'd try to give me that this like sleep journal. And I'm like, whatever, man. Like it's just
Yeah,
I'm just yeah, I'm just adjusting. I'll get adjusted. So I didn't really do anything and then just kind of stopped going to the appointments. And there wasn't anybody to make me follow through. I was a sergeant on my own on an Air Force base. So um
and they knew you just like got back from fucking Afghanistan and you're in like a
yeah,
pretty kinetic area. I mean,
yeah,
everyone's probably like red fucking, like crossed freaking like you're some kind of
yeah.
staying away from you. Don't let this guy explode on us. What were your like coping mechanisms? Did you come back and start boozing, or did you drink prior to this
No,
and it increased, or
I didn't I think my coping mechanisms have always been the same as it was just nicotine and coffee. That was kind of, like I would, if I had a casualty, I would kind of smoke and drink coffee all night long while I'm staying awake to monitor him or whatever. And that became kind of so I didn't really, yeah, never, didn't drink excessively, didn't end up with any of that kind of, well, it was kind of chemical dependency, but it was just kind of, and also kind of fit that, like military stereotype. I'm just always drinking like chewable black coffee and smoking cigarettes.
yeah, that cowboy
Um,
coffee, the good stuff.
yeah.
What do you like? Do you think that that had a I don't know. I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. Do you think that that had a role to play in the way that you're staying up? And I'm not trying to be like, oh, you were like abusing coffee and cigarettes,
Yeah.
but coupled with the like trauma that you had experienced while you're on that first deployment, with like, okay, I've got to stay awake for said casualty, the dog in the kennel, and like keeping that op tempo and that mindset. Like you came home and you're just like slugging coffee, chain smoking cigs, doing whatever, thinking that I don't know, you might get called for something or like subconsciously, like that's probably playing a factor in your inability to sleep, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it was like just not really. It's like I always say, I don't even know if they show you how to turn it on, but you're required to turn it on, and then nobody ever kind of shows you or helps you turn it. And they will if you like seek that help out. But I think at the time, it's not like I knew or
Yeah.
recognized any of that. So I
'Cause
just,
You're
and it
20,
was
you're
also,
probably 20, 25, sorry, like 25,
yeah,
26 years old at this point in time,
yeah,
like
20,
fucking
25.
just got back from Afghanistan on top of the world. Like, don't fucking tell, I know what's wrong with me. Don't fucking tell me what's wrong with me,
Yeah.
like, I don't gotta, yeah,
And then I even, because we were living, like 10,000 feet plus in Afghanistan. So I come back to North Dakota at like sea level. So even though I'm smoking too much, I'm still running like a 6, 7 minute mile. I'm
yeah,
also 25. So I'm like, I feel fine. I'm totally fine. And then not, yeah, again, not being like, oh, well, I'm having a hard time sleeping. Maybe I shouldn't chain smoke cigarettes and drink coffee all day long.
right.
Because why would that be a factor, But it was also going back into a similar, same but different, because then I was back in the Air Force Base where that's me as their medical support and the handlers. And so we did even in that uh, well, one dog in particular, we ended up losing a dog in garrison. And so yeah, I had to kind of went, I think it's it's easy to like kickstart or re-sync back in that cycle. So I had, even though this is in Afghanistan, we had a dog that ended up going down. It was ended up being cancer, but it was me by myself. The veterinarian was the closest army veterinarian was 4 hours away. So again, it was me like kind of trying to manage a canine casualty on my own. And I think so, like again, staying up for like I was awake for like 2 or 3 days until ultimately he ended up being euthanized. Um,
And did you have to do that?
I didn't have to euthanize him, but I
Okay.
did have to do the necropsy. So again, it was another difficult. And so we didn't do it on the dogs that were killed in action because we know the cause of death. The military dogs, and I mean, and for good reason. But when they die, whether from it's a training accident or illness in particular. So this dog's name is Aaron, and Aaron ended up being kind of full of tumors. Like I think I was in the kennel checking out dogs, and Aaron was a really nice dog. So again, a dog that I had a relationship with. And he looked kind of sore, and his belly looked weird. I remember like feeling on his belly going to the kennel, and Aaron he growled at me, and he didn't growl. I mean, he could. He was a bite trained dog, but he wasn't that kind of. He wasn't just a dickhead for no reason. So like we ended up taking him to a vet, and they had pulled all this fluid off his belly, and I didn't know what's going on with him, but then yeah. So it was just kind of like a 3-day ordeal. Where unfortunately, when we finally got him to a surgeon, they opened him up and found all these tumors throughout him. And they basically, the army, it was a civilian veterinarian, but the army veterinarians were like, hey, there's no reason to recover this dog, because the tumors were, there's so many, they're spread out, there was inoperable. It really would have been cruel to wake him up.
Right.
But it still sucked because none of us expected that was going to be the outcome. Because we thought, we didn't know what was going on, but we definitely, for whatever reason, didn't entertain that idea. And so then, we drive back. Me and the handler drive back now with just Aaron's remains again. And so I've been awake 2 or 3 days. And then they did a staff sergeant, he drove, super helpful. I'm glad he came. But it was, now it's like 6 o'clock in the morning the following day, and we have to do basically the necropsy, which is an autopsy. It's just called a necropsy. Since this is not a person. So again, this dog that I had known, awesome dog. Another dog that we'd all tried to save. And now I'm kind of cutting them open, and you have to take tissue samples and all this
Right.
stuff. And they send it back down to the military working dog hospital where it's
Oh,
cataloged and all that stuff. And they're collecting this stuff to try to find information on, why did this happen? Like what kind of tumors are these? Why did it happen? Checking out all their other lymph nodes. But it was difficult. You're taking a dog you have a relationship with and basically kind of
cutting it
cutting
apart.
them
Yep.
cutting them apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't and that I think, so then again just goes back into, then I'm not sleeping well. And at the time, like, well, it makes sense, kind of disassociating from acknowledging like, well, yeah, that sucks. Like, that really sucked, but more into like, well, this is my job. I've done my job before. It can't be that's caused this, but then kind of go back into like not sleeping and not really recognizing the patterns for why or anything
That's
like
going
that.
on. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's obviously creating some problems with your wife at the time. And
Yeah.
that the situation that ultimately leads you guys to separate, or is that further down the road?
It's further down the road.
Okay.
Um,
So
but yeah, further down.
when you get back from this deployment, and now you're at the Air Force Base, you've done all these things, you've had to, work on this dog that had cancer, ultimately gets put down. Are you thinking about another deployment? Are you still on this rotating list of people to be deployed? Or are you looking to re-enlist and then go back to and that's in the Marine Corps we call it the monitor person that kind of like takes care of your, like duty station or like, whatever it may be, like changing that what do you guys call them? The freaking divider or
I know the Navy calls them a detailer. That's why I used that one
oh
because I wasn't sure.
yeah,
But
okay, yeah.
the Army calls them human resources
Okay.
or HRC, which
So
is weird. It's very like corporate name for
yeah,
it, but
seriously, I was gonna say that's very corporate-y.
yeah.
What is it then that is your next step? Where do you go
So
from
actually, while I was in Afghanistan before I rotated home, um, I got an email that said that, so the Special Operations MPC program, the multi-purpose cannon program, the Special Forces Regiment in particular wanted direct medical, like veterinary support. So they're looking to assign people with my career field, my MOS, to Special Forces dog attachments. And so I got this email while I was in Afghanistan, and I told them I was in the middle of like rotating out of country. So I'm really interested. Like, would you have been I was nominated, which was awesome. But just kind of I was nominated based on my experience or whatever. So found a candidate for that. I said I was interested, but I'm rotating home and then going. I had like 30 days of leave, and so they said, no worries, just get us this packet, by this deadline, and go from there. I ultimately completely forgot to do that packet while I went on leave and everything. So I got a second email that said, "Congratulations, if you're getting this email, you've made it past the initial phase of this kind of selection."
So
And I
you
remember
didn't even you're like, I
yeah,
didn't even
well,
submit this fucking
yeah,
paperwork.
and I'm just so I called them and was like, "Hey, I don't know if this is a mistake. I'm really sorry. I forgot about that packet, but I'm still really interested." And they said, well, no, no worries. To be honest, your name had been submitted as a candidate for this, and however many times that we knew you were on R&R, so get us the packet now and then complete, follow through with the second phase. Um, so did all that. It wasn't, like that. So it's basically it's going to work with Green Berets, and it wasn't, so going there as like an enabler. It's so there was a mild selection process. I had to run 5 miles. Um, Nothing like nothing major, nothing like it was like 3 days of activity. Did all that stuff, and then they asked me because there's 5 special forces groups, so they asked which one I would like to go to.
Jeez,
Um,
dude, you got the silver fucking platter of like
yeah, yeah,
military. I mean,
yeah.
which special forces unit would you like to go to, sir?
Well,
Like,
they said because they said your top three. It wasn't guaranteed, but like if you were to
oh,
list
okay,
them in
okay,
order of
okay, okay.
preference, and so, but I did get my first. I put first special forces group down because that would take me back to Fort Lewis in Washington. That's where also my wife at the time was from. So like, yeah, if anything, I'd like to go back to Fort Lewis, and they gave me Fort Lewis. So then I went to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. Went and then reported to First Special Forces Group, and then that's why I spent the rest of my career there. So about 8 years at the First Special Forces Group,
No
dog
shit.
detachment.
That's pretty
Yeah,
fucking cool. Obviously we got to dive into that, but
yeah.
now throughout this whole time though, while you get this from the time you go on R&R or you go on leave or whatever, that 30 days is up. Um, what's that time frame then until you get to First Special Forces Group?
I think I got home. It was probably about 8 months, I want to say.
Okay.
So like from October, November-ish, 2012, and I want to, yeah, right now, 2013, August, November-ish, 2013. I went to jump school in the summer because it sucked. Jumps. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's because it's cold in the winter in Georgia too. It was so hot, but and then I want to say I reported to into group like August, September-ish of 2014,
Okay.
or no, yeah, no, it's August, September of 2014.
Gotcha. That's so you get done, you got your jump wings, you get the First Special Forces Group. What's that introductory? I mean, how do they bridge the gap from somebody that's coming to work with them that's not, like a Green Beret or has gone through like some what do they call it? SQT or that's SEALs. What do they do?
SUT, SFAS, the Special
Yeah,
Forces
Special Forces
Assessment,
Assessment
and then
Selection, and then the
Q
Q
course and
course.
all.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it's
So
a super long training pipeline for long tab guys.
yeah,
Um,
I got a good buddy of mine that I grew up with. He's 31 years old and he just joined the army and he's currently in the
oh, nice.
currently in the Special Forces pipeline. So he's going to be a Green Beret,
That'd
or
be awesome.
hoping to be a Green Beret. Um, yeah, but that long pipeline, how are these guys taking you in? Like obviously they know that you're an asset, an enabler, somebody that's coming into work into the team, but with them not knowing like what kind of experience you have, I guess operationally, like you may have a resume for your your medicine, right? Your canine medicine
Yeah.
skills, but on the side of you being integrated into a team, how are you accepted when you get to First Special Forces Group?
Honestly, I always that was kind of a goal of mine ever since when I worked with NSW, and then I thought like almost made it to be assigned to MARSOC because I really enjoyed, uh, like it wasn't like, oh, I just want to do special operations stuff. It was just I liked kind of the adult, um, the big boy rules, as they say.
Mindset, yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah, there wasn't being micromanaged. There wasn't as much bullshit. There wasn't getting fucked with all the time. Um, And so I was definitely, you don't just like walk it, like stroll in there and they're automatically like, oh, hey, like, but they were super nice. I had to earn it, um, I had to prove that outside of, even with the medicine, right? Like because it's not like they had a huge say in they knew that there was kind of a process they used to move me there. But again, the people selecting me, they don't necessarily have the same. background or know kind of what they're looking for, what they need. But I think because I had that even just up until that point, like the exposure to all that variety of operational stuff, I think that as well as I learned a lot too, right? From even from NSW and learning from their vets. And then again, like what a guy that would be my counterpart, he was a master sergeant. And he was one of the he was one of the first and longest serving, animal care specialists in the special operations community. So he showed me a lot when I was in Virginia Beach. So kind of all those things, like all the opportunities that I got and all the unique experience that I had, kind of, if I had just been sitting in a treatment facility that whole time, I don't think I would have been as successful because I wouldn't
Right.
have had that like frame of reference for even like I said, having that deployment with the infantrymen to realize kind of like being able to appreciate that difference between when you're there as an enabler or support, and then even all they needed me to do was make sure the dogs take care of the dogs, make sure the dogs are operational, and then everything else was kind of I think as a result of demonstrated capability and then them investing. And I think a lot of like Green Berets, like special forces, right? Not to speak too much for those dudes, but like, a big thing they do is training partner forces or, like building people up to assist them because they're working in teams of 12 and, there's the movies and there's books, but so that then being like, oh, this guy's not a complete idiot sometimes, and then them investing into me becoming like being able to help them
Right.
even more so. So like even just having the kind of human medical support stuff. So being able to support that way, being able to I went able to get a SFAWIC, the urban SFAWIC Special Forces Urban Assault Course. I think I'm starting to. It's only been a year and a half, but sometimes I'm starting to forget all the acronyms. And then also I was able to certify as a used stock dog handler, and I would handle dogs primarily in training. And then even just investing time, like I've always been able to, I don't know, I'm not like a super awesome rifle shooter, but shooting a rifle and a pistol is different. And so when I first went to the range and I ended up, being a cool enabler where I had a Glock 19, but like I didn't know up
Yeah.
until that point, I would do like M9 call as medic stuff and not realize that M9 call is really kind of bullshit, right? I'm just shooting a really relatively large silhouette at 25 yards or whatever, and grouping and all that stuff doesn't matter. You just have to get it on the silhouette. And then so going to the range with them and trying to shoot a pistol and seeing like how much I sucked at shooting a pistol, but
Oh
then
yeah.
having like one of my best friends now. I mean, he was an engineer sergeant, but and then some of the weapon sergeants there, like they taught me how to shoot a pistol until the point where like I could beat some of the guys at beer shoots. Not the really good guys, but some of the other
Yeah.
guys where we
You got
did
some dude,
competition shooting. Yeah.
yeah. Oh man, I'm sure he had a couple cases of beer. Like, dude, you just lost to the fucking dog doc. Like, you're,
Yeah, actually, one guy in particular, he would do that. He'd be like, "I'm gonna challenge Evan." I'm like, "Why?" Just because I'm the only one you can beat out here. So I had been spending extra time shooting with some of the other guys, and so he didn't know that. And so I beat him the first time at the shoot, and then he was like, "Whatever, man. It's just fucking lucky." I'm like, "Let's do it again, man." I was like, "Yeah, let's do it again." And I beat him the second time, and yeah,
Oh,
he
that's great.
stormed
That is great.
stormed off.
Um,
But
so yeah, it seems like they integrated you pretty well and like becoming a part of the team. Uh, are you I guess the way that I'm trying to put it, like, are you directly attached? So like, yeah, I'm sure that there's the deployment stuff that did you deploy with these guys?
he had to I deployed in 2017 to Kandahar with the SOTIF and it was kind of a mix. We had dogs from first and seventh group on that trip, and then I was the medical support for that. So
Okay.
for at that time, so much had been like wound down, like kind of, especially
Yeah, but
compared to
there's still
2013.
yeah, there's still shit going on though. But before you jump into the deployment, what I want to wonder is like, knowing that you're going to be going on deployment with these guys, were you integrated into like the team or the squad where, you're another guy in the stack, like that kind of thing? Like they want you there with the team for the dog at all times? Like how is that working?
So in training, yeah. Like in training, especially because a lot of times if we're just doing training as the dog detachment, again, we don't have so even like when we'd do demos, I'd get to put all my kit on and be another gun for a dog and pony show type thing. Um, and just yeah, I did. It was awesome because I just was kind of another one of the dudes for all of our training stuff. And then, um, but on deployment, no, like that wasn't. A lot of times it'd be multiple elements that would
Right.
go out, and so I would always generally be with a supporting element or the command control, like the C2 element. So that was the thing where if something happened to the dog team, then I was there. So I was there on the mission, but the
Gotcha.
main element that's like breaching and stuff,
Right. Obviously, you're
the
not
purpose, yeah,
standing there
no,
like two man in the stack. But I was just curious in the
yeah,
sense of like what kind of environment you're preparing for, what kind of things that they were integrating you into, so that way when you did get to deployment, like being you wouldn't want to sit your corpsman in the assault element. I understand that,
yeah,
but I didn't know if like you guys were going to I mean, even going to Kandahar, like a low key outpost that it's just you and the team, and you've got to like pick up those priorities of work and the duties of going out on missions and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm sure you'll get into it, but
yeah.
I was just trying to couple that with what they integrated you with in training and where that came into play during deployment.
Yeah, I think yeah, it really wasn't. I got included in a lot of training a lot of times just because, again, investing that time, energy back into me, but then just kind of also out of necessity, because we're trying to give, if we're training as the dog detachment, trying to give those dogs the best sight picture as possible through that like repetition and association. So just being used and then having like really those guys set me up for success. But on the deployment itself, it was kind of up to me because at the time too, me and the other like what would there be like 5 or 6 counterparts that were the first people getting sent to the special forces dog detachments. Each one of us was kind of used differently, and it had a lot to do with like I think again like demonstrated capability or your performance. And for me, it was kind of on that deployment, figuring out how or what I thought was going to be the biggest benefit, the most useful part of me having there. So if I'm over there as the medical support for the dog teams, but I'm just sitting back on Kandahar, there's a vet clinic across the street from our kennel. And so there's no point for me, like if I'm being sent here, I'm going to spend time here and have all this additional kind of training and experience, then that was where I kind of got included. And luckily, and it was really up to the team sergeants, right? There was team sergeants like, oh, we're not, we don't know him, so we're not gonna,
Right, right. Yeah, like we're
and
not just going to integrate
yeah,
this guy
yeah,
into
right. Is
fucking
it like a,
patrol or whatever.
yeah, which makes sense. And then I did a lot of QRF. So on the QRF a lot as well as because I would also work out where QRF is generally staged with dust off. So it was kind of I did that. We did that as the dog guys because the dog guys that's the other kind of unique thing for the handlers themselves is they came from a platoon or they came from a team, but now they're assigned to the kennel, so they kind of get shopped out like 1 to 2 teams at a time to different ODAs
Gotcha.
or different
Gotcha.
different companies. And so it's a small world though. So a lot of these guys like they went to the Q course together, or, like they know each other, but um I forgot where I was going with that. Yeah, so I like we would take it up like kind of doing our own planning for because that's really for the canine stuff too, is that like people they may want the dogs for your capability as a dog team, but they don't really
Need
they're
it or
not
something.
they're yeah, and this like that sergeant major, he's got so many responsibilities, all this like op board and stuff. And so they know they're including the dog on mission, but really that kind of getting into the weeds of like, what are we going to do if X, Y, or Z happens is kind of up to the dog guys, us ourselves. So even just going over and meeting the dust off units before, we're going out, there's a mission that includes them. And then, so then I have that relationship with them. So that way they've met me, they know I'm on QRF. Like if if there's a canine casualty, and even especially because that was another, luckily, nothing happened to any of my human dog handling friends. But like if the handler or the dog, something happened to them, then I would, if QRF wasn't
Yeah,
called, I'd be able to shift over to dust off, and they would take me with them for both
gotcha.
the kind of guardian angel, as they called it, as well as
Right.
to assist the flight medic, whether that be like handling the dog, because that can be, an issue, right? If the dog
Right,
handler's
different if they
down.
don't that and like the handler
Yeah.
and not only that like a flight medic that's trained on the anatomy of a human isn't I mean necessarily going to know what to do with the dog. I would that's at least what I would assume.
Well, we do a lot of that too. So I'd go, do cross training with their flight medics because they know what to do. They just don't necessarily know where. And they get some of
Right.
that cross training and training, but we all know that like it's never really enough when you check that like 8 hour block of I've done veterinary cross training. But still, since you develop that relationship, they're more than happy to, yeah, the dog goes down or we do a 9 line and it's a handler. You can
That's
jump on
awesome.
board kind of thing.
That's good
Yeah.
that you guys had that rapport and the capability to be able to do that
Yeah.
because I know that like sometimes there can be a lot of red tape with, oh, you gotta request permission to go and then you're waiting for permission from, you know, X, Y, and whatever chain of command, structure that you've got set up to be able to jump on a bird and go out to a call. Like, I mean, I don't know, special forces community probably works a lot different than the conventional side of things. I mean, we know it obviously does. So, um,
It's definitely true because I have the Army actually because in a few weeks here there's the annual Army Canine training event that the Army has me. Kind of, this is the second year, so last year was the first year. So they invited me back to teach to kind of pass on some of my unique experience that I had to both veterinary personnel and the handlers themselves. And so we were able to coordinate dust off coming from my training lane. And I'm talking to these MP handlers, and they're all young. And you just kind of take for granted. Like I've been on so many helicopters, especially like on that deployment where I'm going out as QRF or part of the helicopter assault force every night. So I'm always on the back of a 60 or a 47. And, like having, meeting another soldier that's like, oh, I've never been on a Black Hawk. I'm like, what do you mean you've never been on? What do you mean you've never
yeah.
been on Black Hawk? So you take for granted, kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess that's
The fucking cool ass
yeah,
opportunities that you got with being
yeah,
connected,
yeah,
like that's amazing. Another thing that I wanted to, kind of dive into is, you know, as you're progressing through this time, with the special forces community, uh, and then up to this deployment, how are you? I mean, are you still dealing with some of that trauma that you experienced from your first deployment? You know,
yeah.
how are you coping with these things along the way?
I think so. Because that was another thing I kind of realized on that trip is, and then, like, it's not like just one thing. I kind of try to like look at objectively without, it's not like, oh, I, did so much but there was a lot of times there's multiple dog handlers, but there's only one of me. And, I didn't have to, well, the guys would have understood, like if I didn't go out on QRF or I wasn't there that night, they would have understood, but I couldn't. I just didn't I wasn't comfortable with the idea. Like, hey, if just because I have, been awake every night, I mean, we worked at night, right? But just because I've been, on the QRF or whatever, like um, I couldn't just say like, oh, I'm not going to do it tonight because am tired or something because I kind of developed that weird superstition, like not that I'm not just that like something bad's gonna like everything's been going fine, but if I'm not that'll like the one time where I'm like, no, I'm gonna
Yeah,
skip
it's
going on
it's
this one. That's like the one time something's gonna happen.
right.
And so noticing that same pattern of like I'm not sleeping well, I'm tired, fatigued, but like I don't want to can in good conscience be like, yeah, guys, I'll let you guys,
No, yeah,
yeah,
I think most people in that environment, especially with you being working with a higher op tempo in terms of like the we went on foot patrol every single day, right? We were outside the wire every single day. We would do some mundane bullshit, and there'd be other times where things would pop off, and you get IEDs, there's gunfire, uh, all that stuff. But like in the sense of where you guys are loading up on helos, you're going out on missions every single night, coming back, doing, I'm sure like making sure your medical gear is in a core, like whatever your pack set up, or all the stuff that you have, like you've got another role that you fill beyond just being a dude like attached to the team or going out for QRF. So um constantly going out, and then not wanting to, I don't want to say miss out, or just not be there in the instance that something bad happens, knowing that you could have been an asset and like taking care of handling a certain situation, and then you're not there. That plays a huge, that's a lot of weight to put in your pack, mentally and physically. I'm sure your body was just like, breaking down on you at the cyclic rate.
Yeah, and because having kind of that reverse cycle, I think I noticed because like they would I forgot that Ambien, give us Ambien, but take an Ambien, I'd sleep for like 3 hours, and that was it, 3, 4 hours, and then I'd be awake again. And so I think just kind of that, like, get in the habit of just always being ready when, even when you don't need to be. Like there wasn't anything. So just again, like probably did just continuation of kicking off again that like poor sleep cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
Not also not knowing at the time how detrimental that is to everything overall with your physical and mental health. Just and then also not wanting to really I'm sure like the sergeant major we had was great, and the command, like they were all great dudes. I probably be like, hey man, I'm not sleeping well. Like I think I need a break, and they would have been like, yeah man, just take a break. But I didn't do that.
Right. So you kept, I mean,
No,
upholding yourself to that, I guess standard, and then I don't know if accountability, standard or accountability, but you just had this mindset where you knew that like you had a job to do and you're going to do it while you guys were deployed. So, I mean, that's another thing that I think people don't think about is like the level of that high tempo, hyper arousal, the situational awareness, and like being involved in that environment. Like, you think of like the same thing. We're talking about you doing a lot of work with dogs. To think about that in the same way, they're constantly being worked up, worked up, worked up, and then imagine coming home and seeing the way that they're interacting with other, like no, unless it's somebody that you know or worked with or like was in your platoon, it takes a little bit of time to transition out and be able to effectively communicate with other people. And that's, I guess, a good segue into coming back, unless there's something that I missed from the deployment being
oh
something that
no,
is there something that happened that was significant, or a moment that you think that would um, you
there,
know give way to a
yeah,
story down the road?
yeah, there were. I mean, just one. I think there's, it was an eventful deployment, but I think the one thing, it was a human guy. It was human soldiers. So the special forces companies will have, they can call it an uplift platoon or uplift company. So they have infantrymen that kind of help. They provide additional security. They use kind of as needed. So it was this 19-year-old kid. He was a mortarman, and he was on. I remember he was on QRF a couple times with me, and he was young. I mean, he's 19. He was 19, super young. You could tell he was uncomfortable. So I would just, uh, because I was able to grow a beard and everything. So he didn't know the difference between, and they had to stay clean shaven. And so I
Yeah.
think they always kind of felt like they stuck out, and they were younger, and they like didn't know everybody. So I remember I was just bullshitting with him on a couple QRFs. To find out, where he's from, Alaska. He'd only been in the army like 6 months. Um, and he got married like 2 weeks before deploying. He was really happy that he's an infantryman. He gets to go on a deployment. He knows, like, he considers himself lucky, right, that he's on this deployment and doing what he's doing, and he can't wait to be able to actually go out on mission. So I talked to him about like the missions that I had done were like, um, and then so he did. Then the next time I saw him after that, was at because we were at Tarrant Count, and so I was doing QRF that night. So I flew in with the rest of the QRF guys, and I saw he was all, kitted up and also making that kind of standard mistake on your first mission where you're carrying way too much stuff, but you don't know it yet. You don't know that you're like, so I saw
Yeah.
him like he's got all of the things and he's got his mortar, he's got his base plate. I'm like, oh, you poor bastard. But he's like so excited. Um, but they're doing PCCs and PCIs, pre-combat checks and inspections with the team sergeant. And he comes up to me. And I think because I had kind of talked to him. So he's someone that he thought it, so he comes up and says, hey, Sergeant, like, what's up, man? He's like, I forgot my headlamp. So he's nervous because he's like, shit, I forgot my headlamp and we're doing PCCs and PCIs. They're bringing me on the mission. Like the last thing he wants to do is get chewed out for not having all this shit. And I was like, don't worry, man. I always had an extra. So I had an extra headlamp in my pocket and gave him the headlamp and he went back to be like, here, I've got all my stuff. And it ended up being they ended up a lot of times what they would do is just overnight, like periods of darkness, a POD mission. But this was a remain over day or a helicopter assault force remain over day. And I was on QRF. It was like um, I think it was like 48 or 72-hour QRF. And so I ended up like it was uneventful for the first day. And then this was so we ended up the QRF, they took casualties, I think on the second day, got into a big tick, troops in contact with accurate and direct fire, where they had kind of strong pointed this compound. And so the QRF got spun up and we were getting called out. And so, there ended up being one casualty or multiple casualties, but one KIA ended up being him.
Jeez.
And so we just kind of, having talked to him, it's not like I knew him well, but just like, here's a kid that's 19 years old, been in the army, less than a year, married 2 weeks or whatever before coming to Afghanistan. And, it's very first mission he never made it back from.
Jeez, dude, that's so shitty.
Yeah.
Seriously. What like how do you even I mean there's so many cases throughout history of situations like that where this young go-getter is like ready to be there, wants to partake. First patrol outside the wire, first mission you fly into, first op that you do, whatever it is. And whether it be a gunshot or an IED or IDF, it's like um I don't know. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And you guys obviously had to cover the body and the casualties from said gunfight, said tick that they
Yeah.
had gone in.
Yeah. And because he had, he had the 18 Deltas, the Special Forces medics were there working on, but he just had, it's one of those things with casualties. Sometimes there's nothing anyone could have done. So it's just one of those, when I think knowing kind of, just all those facts of just, like what are the odds, that's just,
Yeah.
shitty luck, I guess. But
Yeah, I don't know if there's I don't know who decides and who chooses who stays and who
yeah,
goes, but it's unfortunate. Um, so yeah, did you guys did you do anything? Did you do a memorial for him while you were in country, or did you?
I remember. So they did. We all kind of ended up going down to the flight line as they kind of did the whole ceremonial process of carrying his remains onto the aircraft and bring him home.
Right.
Um, it was awesome. I mean, that's all, and that was great, right? Because that everybody, the entire kind of SOTA showed up for that to see him off, as well as one of his infantry buddies, another mortarman, was injured with him, and so a couple of times I went with some of the other guys and would go see him he was at the CAF, the Kandahar Roll 3 hospital there. Um, so yeah, I mean that was all kind of all awesome, I guess, for like otherwise a super shitty
Right.
situation.
Yeah, in
But
the sense that you get to have that send off and know that everybody's there. Uh, fuck, that sucks. Where it's like it's hard to shift that conversation from, something like that. And you got to think that I was that 19-year-old kid at one point in time, like literally on my first deployment, 19 years old, running around with a saw and like that, yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What was the culminating point of that, or like the culmination of that deployment was, brought you guys home? And what year is this?
2000, that was 2017. Um,
So it's still,
then,
I didn't know if it like transition, you guys were
oh
there
yeah.
for like 12 months or whatever it
Oh
was.
no, it was like six months,
Okay,
6 month
gotcha.
deployment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I just
Um,
got back same
now
thing,
with
October.
in October, okay. So with
Yeah.
you guys have a casualty within the unit, a couple dogs throughout the deployment. Did you have to assess any casualties with the dogs that you were working with?
Yeah. With one of the dogs, he ended up, we had to manage him for, I think, 2 weeks and kind of like successfully, recovered him. And, uh, yeah, it wasn't, not as many dogs were lost, luckily, by that stage as like compared to 2013, where I think, there was a lot of dogs were killed on that. But I think that was the kind of difference seeing, again, you were talking about kind of having like chip on your shoulder. In 2013, everybody was everybody's pushing out. But 2017, it was kind of, special operations leading those enabled or like partner force led missions. So the Afghan commandos, supposed to be kind of, and they're just going with them. And then so we'd, be back at Kandahar and see like even the veterinarians that were kind of supporting us, and they were, just having such a different experience where, some of those like medical staff that worked in the hospital, they're all nice and they didn't mean anything by it, but they're like, oh, like we're having it was like I don't know why I can't think of it, the cornhole. Like we're having a cornhole tournament tonight. Um, you know, and then they're like, why can't you guys make it? Like, well, we're working, like we don't, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It's great that, it's great that you guys are having a barbecue and a tournament, but like we're flying out to Tarin Kowt to see an airfield and like push into a village. So, uh,
Yeah, they
yeah, just
hats off. Enjoy yourselves,
yeah,
guys.
yeah, save us some hot dogs, I guess, when we get back at
Yeah.
6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh shit. Well, it sounds like, I mean, the like op tempo, obviously you guys are going out every night and like doing something. Had to sustain a casualty with somebody sustained a casualty, a couple dogs, and I'm sure a few people got injured. Um, through the when you get home from this deployment now, how are you, I guess, handling this? How's the relationship with your wife? How's your relationship with the people around you? Have you gone to seek any type of treatment after this deployment, or what's going on with you?
I hadn't yet, and I think it seems like it was a lot better, um, like especially than the first one. And still again, like the guy really close with the guys I was deployed with, like one of the, Green Beret handlers, still, one of, or both of those guys, two of those guys are still two of my best friends. Um, and a lot of us have kind of moved on, or a lot of us are medically retired. I was having a lot more headaches and like issues with balance and vertigo, but I still didn't really. It's that same kind of thing, like not really, knowing what was going on or slowing down enough. So I just kept kind of like, it's just nothing or whatever. And the issues with my now ex-wife, I think, started with kind of, I think she always kind of expected that I would slow down or something, something like eventually this would all be over. But, at this point, I'd been in for, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years, 10 years, 10, 11 years. Um, and then that really came to a head the following year, 2018, when, it looked like I was going to be, potentially going to a special missions unit to do the same thing, right? But to like go from the special forces dog detachment to a special mission unit, one of the special mission unit dog detachments. And then I went and trained with them for, I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that. And, so I think at that point she'd had enough and said, like, I need you to pick the dogs or me. And, I I didn't I didn't pick
Yeah, you
her.
didn't pick her.
First, yeah, which didn't go super well.
Yeah,
Wasn't
I mean, I don't mean to laugh at that, but
Yeah.
I mean,
No, it was
I
yeah.
think everybody's gone through those experiences with a relationship, and um, yeah, you got the
Yeah.
dog. So,
Yeah.
what kind of things did, and I'm not trying to get dive into the personal, but did you find yourself like not really caring that it was like ending? You know, I like, were you more concerned with what you were doing in your job than you were with like, okay, well, I guess that's gonna
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I think like in hindsight, I don't think, I mean, we did counseling and stuff. And I think even on that counseling though, doing the marriage counseling, which was like the command was great. They had like resources for that. Um, but I think even with my decision to I like ending this marriage was, I don't think I recognized up until that point how much I think she ended up resenting me for feeling like I always picked my work over her, which was true. It was absolutely true. But I think for me, it was kind of, I justified it by, well, I mean, I'm in the army, like what, there isn't
Right.
picking anything else. It is this. And even if I wanted to pick you over my work, I've still got, a 2 or 3 year commitment minimum left on my current enlistment. So what do you want me to do about that? And then there's probably things I could have done, like request to be assigned to a treatment facility, to go to a clinic and have a different kind of, because even without the deployment, we were gone training all over the place all the time, but I liked it. I think I did like it. Obviously, I kept doing it. I enjoyed it. And so I never recognized that like those all were decisions where I could have not gone on that training rotation, or I could have not done those things, but ultimately, I wasn't willing to do that.
Right. I mean, you get this I don't know, I say like in the FOMO, you know, like the fear of missing out, or like the fear of like not being able to, like, it seems like you've been, you know, looking from the way that you entered, and you're like, then you went on your first deployment with the infantry guys, and now you're working with the special forces. You know, going out in missions with fucking Green Berets, and now you're going to like interview for a special missions unit. You know, like, you've just seen the progression, and obviously there's no slowing down. You talk, well, listening to other guys in that career path, um, you know, in the special forces community, like, you know, you hear all these guys talk about like that everything else outside is kind of like white noise. You know, like you've got
Yeah.
your focus on what you're trying to get done, and it's like, well, fuck it, you know, this is what I was made to do.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I really enjoyed, I still do. I still really like, I still get to work with dogs. And I think the only way, I don't know if they always say like the only way you leave is you break, die, or quit. And I wasn't going to quit. Um, and I don't think I could have, like, I felt like, um, just seeing these handlers and these dogs in particular, like what they did and what they do, and how many lives they saved and the sacrifices they make, and specifically the dogs, right? Because again, they don't sign up. The dogs don't choose to be there. They never complain about it. Most of them they're very like well taken care of and happy dogs. Like they're made, and the same thing, they're made for what they're doing. But I think more so than anything, not even just the guys, because those they rotated, we all kind of rotated, but the dogs themselves, seeing it as like there's no equivalent for what I was doing outside of the military. So one, not knowing what I would do outside of what I was doing, kind of having the dream job that I wanted, kind of having met those goals, or made it there, like even just kind of trying to slow down and go work in a clinic or a treatment facility, or take up they like you, I could have taken up tried for a schoolhouse position, or gone to do the whole staff sergeant and then E7 kind of leadership role, but I didn't really
Yeah, but
want to. Like it
that
was
that doesn't sound too appealing when you've got the
no.
experiences that you fucking do, and the capability, like the positions that you're able to get yourself into. I mean, who wants to go to like, oh, I'm gonna go to staff NCO course and like learn how to
Yeah,
fucking write up,
yeah.
you know, paperwork. I don't know.
And then it just felt like just leaving the dogs behind. Like I don't think that. I would have been able to make that kind of conscious decision to say like, all right, well, but it's which is crazy, right? Because like I both recognizing that eventually I have to leave. You can't stay there forever, but not being able to decide to do it until they're like, hey man, you're um because it got to the point with kind of I did two different forms that ear hypofunction from head injuries. I was like my balance was really off. I was puking like every other day. I'm getting nauseous from the vertigo. So it wasn't until they were like, yeah, man, you can't do this anymore. Then I was like, yeah, I kind of figured, but I didn't say anything about it until it kind of
Right.
came to the point that I had to.
So how did that make you feel and like knowing that this is something that you wanted to continue doing and ultimately like, whatever it is, like your command or medical staff is coming up to you saying like, yeah, sorry, like it's time for you to, find something else to do.
It was I don't think at the time, I think I just kind of focused on like, all right, well, like nothing. It was also weird because it happened like leading up to COVID. So I was going to the Army's like TBI center, and COVID happened, and that kind of messed up that whole treatment protocol a great deal from like not like minimizing in person appointments. Um, so I think it was both a good and bad thing because I just kind of refocused on like looking what was going to be next, but then also kind of the pattern of failing to recognize like you kind of I don't know, it's kind of a weird phenomenon where I could acknowledge all the things that are risks that from talking to guys that have got out and just hearing other veterans talk about things you should like try to be mindful of or watch out for or anticipate, like just knowing what those were, but then almost making the assumption, well,
Not gonna be
that's
you or
not gonna
me.
be
Yeah.
me. Yeah, it's it's not. I'll be I'll be fine.
Oh
And
yeah.
then you
Just
get there, and then you're like, oh wow, like that's
mhm.
yeah. I mean, everyone says these things for a reason.
Yeah, I remember I did not get along well with my platoon sergeant that was my platoon sergeant on my exit from the Marine Corps. And I thought I had it all figured out. And I remember, as I was getting ready to leave, he like and I did not like this guy and he did not like me. And he was like, Giuliano, he's like, you're not gonna like it out there. I was like, fuck you, dude. Like, yes, I am. And he's like, you're a Marine, like he's like, as much as I don't like you, like you're a good Marine. You're not gonna like it. And I was like, all right, whatever, fuck this guy, but figured out real quick that not that he was right, but uh, he was right. Like like I don't know the right way to I don't know the correct way to put it in the sense of I don't want to agree with what he was saying, but he knew the kind of person that I was, and time after service would not fare well for me, at least initially. I knew I regretted it like right off the bat.
Yeah, and I had a good like our team sergeant, our kennel master of the group. He was good because he would talk about that kind of like, hey, we all base our lives around this, but like, sooner or later, it's going to be over, and it's coming up for some of you. So just start thinking about like who you are without your hat.
Yeah, exactly. And
Um,
that's a hard thing to accept like in the moment. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
for some people that takes quite a bit of time to move on from that. But I think being involved with the special forces community, and not to negate the fact that there are plenty of programs out there for everybody, but do you think that your transition or like starting that process to get out was a little bit different than your everyday, soldiers in the sense of the support and the experience and connections that you had opposed to like some fucking sergeant in the 101st,
oh, absolutely. I think and I kind of recognize it that it's sometimes it doesn't seem fair almost because I got kind of pulled on into the soft care coalition. So I had a representative there, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting. And then there's other. I don't know. I'm not familiar with all the programs, and I know there's other like non special operations soldiers I've talked to that have gotten kind of the 6 month internship program. But I know for me, it was a lot easier. Nobody fought, like nobody, um, from my team sergeant to my sergeant major to my commander, nobody was fighting against giving me or providing me with like every opportunity to like move on and transition like that for that last 6 months. Plus, I, I checked in every so often or if they needed something with the
Yeah,
dogs.
if you're just on
Um,
OFP, dude,
yeah, so I
getting,
was, yeah, just kind of learning. Um, yeah, had that ability to make even from even the like the battalion PA, like making sure that everything was documented for the medical evaluation board process and
yeah.
um,
That's
kind
fucking
of all that
huge
stuff.
right there. That's
Yeah,
huge, dude, to have somebody back you like that. Because, I mean, again, not to, but like, being like a enlisted, whatever, your NCO, maybe a staff NCO. It's not every day that like the medical officer at BAS or whatever is gonna go out of their way to be like, well, let's sit down and talk about these things. It's kind of like whatever is documented in your medical record. And if you hadn't been seen for it. You can't just like walk into the MO like as you're getting checking out and be like, well, both my knees, my back, and it's like, where have you said this like along the way? Like, like you're just gonna write these things down. So I think it's good to have somebody that's gonna go to bat for you in that exit process that's gonna document all those instances of whatever it may be, getting a cut on your hand to falling down the flight of stairs or a wrong parachute fucking entry or whatever it is, because that comes into play, when applying for your
yeah,
BA benefits.
yeah, yeah, for sure. It was. That's I think I wasn't because I hear stories, and I have those infantrymen I deployed with or other veterans where they were kind of just they're on their own to figure out that the entire mess of bureaucracy and administrative stuff. And I don't think at any point I didn't have somebody I could call to say like, hey, they're saying X, Y, and Z, and like I don't understand what like they want from that Soft Care Coalition representative to yeah again the battalion PA to my own command saying like yeah we're like here's all the stuff that they need.
Oh, sorry, the dog keeps bothering me here. He wants me to play with him, but not having to fight that battle. Come on, dude. Not having to fight that battle on your own, like that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
What was it then that set you up for getting connected? Like, did they push? You said they pushed you into getting connected with that nonprofit, the soft nonprofit program.
Yeah, so just yeah, they once the med board started, the medical evaluation board, then it kind of like and then the TBI thing was the attempt at rehabilitation and my balance in particular. I had really bad migraines and still do and have some eye divergence. So from kind of the repetitive head trauma, my eyes kind of point in slightly different directions. So a lot of times, like my left eye in particular is always trying to pull back into focus. So I still do vision therapy like once a week. And I have glasses with prisms I'm supposed to wear more than I do. But I always bring that up just because it took them a long time, like for them trying to figure out when my vision sucked and these headaches were happening until finally, I think like a year into the process, I stumbled across, they got referred to an Air Force doctor. It was like, oh yeah, this is really common in like NFL athletes, NHL. I'm going to check your eyes for this. And sure enough, like I needed prisms to kind of redirect. So I tried to talk about it just so that someone has, the TBI symptoms of that kind of blurry vision, headaches, nausea, that some get those like find an
Yeah,
ophthalmologist
check that
to
shit
check your
out.
eyes. I probably was saying before that, but um, yeah, so that eventually we're like, yeah, you're going to be you won't be returned to service. So the attempt of rehabilitation to you're not fit for duty, and then once it was not fit for duty, the Care Coalition kind of like I got
Gotcha,
assigned to them
gotcha.
for the evaluation, in which they were kind of like based on your military record and you're an E6 with over 12 years. The findings of the board was rather than medical separation, but for medical retirement because I ended up um, being totally and permanently disabled, able to work, but like they were
Right.
like, yeah,
Yep.
you're with everything documented, you're at, you're over 100%.
Yep, I got that. Now with that, with being connected to the Soft Coalition, or what? I'm sorry, what is it called again? I don't want to mispronounce it.
It's a Special Operations Soft Care Coalition, like Special
Soft
Operations
Care
Forces.
Coalition. Okay.
Yeah.
So with them, they end up kind of helping you out with what you're doing now, right? They get you on track with what you're doing now.
So yeah, so I ended up, and that's also like for the Instagram thing, which yeah, because it was never not allowed to have social media, but it was kind of frowned upon, like or not, you just weren't gonna. So I started the Den Mother account kind of anonymously, just like looking at kind of identifying like, hey, my time here at the in the army and the group is coming to an end, like rejoining the real world, seeing what all that stuff's like. And just kind of ended up seeing all this canine stuff and seeing, a lot of canine first aid training is taught by veterinary clinical staff, veterinarians and veterinary technicians. And sometimes I get a lot of, I can and have gotten angry messages because they don't agree with me saying that what they're teaching isn't necessarily the best practice. Um, and so I try to like probably over clarify, like, hey, I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm just saying that like, like from my kind of unique experience, the things that you're teaching aren't going to work. They're just not going to play out the way that they do in your like you're in a hospital with all the resources you need, people to help. It's chaotic. I know it's chaotic. I was thinking, it's like, I'm not trying to take away from the trauma of working in a hospital, but it's a completely different, unique experience when you're working out of a backpack and you don't have all of those things you're used to.
Right.
So trying to like kind of being like, well, this is, seeing law enforcement in particular, law enforcement canine. And the reality is now that law enforcement canine, their casualties outpace the military's by a significant amount. An average of 3 to 5 police canines are killed in the line of duty every month. Last year, 25 police canines were killed in the line of duty. And you could say like maybe that's a drop in the hat. If there's 50,000 working dog teams across the continental United States, 25 of them a year being killed isn't, like an awful statistic, but it's still a lot. And by and large, those dog handlers, not only do I know how traumatic and emotionally devastating that can be, it's going to be up to them to
Right.
save their dog.
Yep. That's what I
And,
was going to say. Through that statistic, how many of those, 25 dogs that were killed could have been saved if the handler had known, X, Y, and Z, and like could be some things that you're knowledgeable of. Yeah.
well, I don't know because there's always maintained like there's casualties. Some casualties live no matter what you do. Some casualties die no matter what you do. And
Yeah.
there's those that you can make the difference. And I have, in my traveling and teaching, I've got to meet a lot of police officers. Like actually, I'm wearing Jedi. He was killed in Seattle. His handler was nice enough to give me one of his hoodies for Jedi. Um, uh, and even he kind of asked me if I thought he could have done anything different, and honestly, no. But also, I don't think it benefits anybody for me to say you could have because you can't change it
Right.
now.
Right.
So I don't know. I do know that but just even the education factor, because that's, a very angry veterinarian that really doesn't know my background, made a lot of assumptions, was like, you can't possibly train every dog team in the United States. And I'm like, I know I can't, nor I'm like, I would try to if I could, but I know I can't. But at the same time, I want them all to get good training that I know will matter or make a difference. And so that's even the point of like, rather than getting upset and being like, well, I think something different than you. I'm like, well, why don't you look at what I'm saying and think about it and then implement it into your own training? So that way, all of these dog handlers are getting good training, not just some of them that are
Right.
taking courses by people that have a significant amount of field or operational experience versus hospital experience. Because it's weird, right? Like everyone can acknowledge that in human medicine, right? If you work in an ER, an ER is a traumatic, high tempo, like stressful place to work. Then also working in an ambulance and being a medic those are two completely different things. And perhaps that ER doctor isn't the best person to teach that field class because those are two different environments. Not to say that they're not transferable, right?
Knowledgeable.
Like
Yeah.
Like I could go learn to work in a clinic just as someone could go learn to work in the field. But I was kind of maintain like, hey, I wouldn't go into your ER and tell you what to do. So I don't understand like, you know, that disconnect of, you know, still like even just it's really neither here nor there, but even a lot of them, I see them veterinarians still teaching dog handlers to orally intubate the dog, put the endotracheal tube down their trachea through the mouth. And it's just, if the, it's just not going to work. Most of the dogs that survive the injuries are still conscious. And so they're, you know, like opening their mouth, especially a patrol trained Belgian Malinois, shoving a tube down their throat. They cut the tubes in half. I've had it happen at least twice. Um, so again, you're wasting this time training a a skill that's not necessarily going to be beneficial. Not only that, but how proficient were they really going to be at it in the moment that they need it? So focus on things that do matter, but you have to have a frame of reference for what things make the most difference. And I have had the benefit of some handlers messaging me saying like, hey, you know, I appreciate
The
you know,
things that,
whatever I said, because they, you know, they had an injury to their dog. A guy had his dog jump into a dumpster after a bad guy, and the dumpster slashed his leg open, and he was able to put a bandage high and tight on the leg to stop the bleeding because he saw something I posted.
nice.
Um,
I mean, shit,
so
right
that was
there.
really,
That's one,
that was
just one, dude.
yeah,
Like
that
if
was awesome. Yeah.
that is awesome. Um, how would you handle a situation where you needed to put a would you have to correct the dog? Is that the quickest way to do it? You just make a cut into the
Well,
throat or what?
I yeah, I you know, I through the training and the training I was able to receive and participate in, like I was able to do like a crike or a trach, an advanced surgical airway. But I don't teach, you know, teach that to. I'll teach that to if it's a paramedic, someone that's already able
Right,
has that
right.
skill, how to apply the skill they have to a dog. But you know, there's just also having kind of the frame of reference to know a lot of these police officers aren't necessarily have any medical background. So again, you have to really prioritize what you're going to teach. I think, in my opinion, prioritize what you're going to teach and what they need to focus on that's within their wheelhouse. And one, they're going to be able to remember in a very chaotic and stressful moment, and two, that like the things that will make a difference. Because you know, a lot of the times, if your dog is in such a bad shape that they need a surgical airway, the unfortunate reality is you as a police officer handler that exceeds both your skill
Yeah.
level and capability and equipment that you're going to have available to you in that moment. So just really trying to that's just like shooting a pistol, right? I didn't get good at shooting a pistol by someone talking to me about it or reading about it. So even with
Yeah.
the kind of the canine training aids, now the mannequins that bleed and breathe, so they get those muscle memory reps in um, with
Practical
some of that kind of
application.
yeah,
Yeah.
some of that
Um,
applied stress.
so with your experience and the knowledge that you have behind this, you kind of taken this Den Mother Instagram page, turned it into um like a business, yeah. Like you're going around and
Yeah,
you're teaching different departments or agencies or whatever it may be, like proper way to sustain or for obviously sustain to get to higher care. And what does that include, like maintenance and just everyday care for the dog as well?
cover that a little bit. But I focus primarily on like trauma care, like
Yeah.
pre-hospital intervention, because that's the thing is, you know, most of the there's a lot of people that care about these dogs that are making or going out of their way to try to make efforts. Like I said, not to talk shit about the veterinarians, but so when I teach the class, I'm like, hey, you know, your supporting veterinarians can talk to you about some of those more routine day-to-day things and maintenance and stuff, which you definitely need to know as a dog handler, whether it's the vaccine schedule, like the risk of parasites and zoonotic disease. These are all things that I think you should probably be familiar with your profession. But in terms of, you know, using field dressings and massive hemorrhage and all that stuff. So I kind of my class, especially because it is just me, I'm trying to, you know, again, I'm still like trying to figure stuff out. It's been about a year and a half. And I had surgery and stuff that took me out for a while. Finding a smarter way to do it. But when it's just me for an 8 to 16 hour course with these guys, I really like prioritize just
Yeah, like main
and I tell
things.
them, yeah, I tell them that like, hey, the gnarly cuts and you can get injuries during training. All the day to day stuff is definitely going to be stuff you use. That those are skills, kind of first aid skills that you're going to use more often as a dog handler. But for my class, we're just focusing on even though it's hopefully a low and remains a low probability, like hopefully you never need any of this stuff, but like what you should put in your individual first aid kit for trauma, not for first aid per se, to have it on you. That's the biggest thing. I always say, if you take nothing else away from the class they give you, have your first aid kit on you, because in your vehicle isn't going to do anybody any good depending upon
Yeah, like how
how the
far you chase a
yeah
perp or something, you're like four
yeah
blocks down from your vehicle and running through
even
freaking backyards, whatever.
a lot of them will keep it in their glove box, and I get it. You got a lot of shit on. You got a lot of bullshit on your equipment. You have organizational restrictions and requirement. But like, even if you just sent your dog in a house and your patrol car is parked out on the curb, let's say you're 3 bedrooms deep, your dog's bleeding, even another officer's bleeding. You know, the average 70-pound dog has 3 liters of blood circulating inside their body. They only need to lose 2 liters for it to be fatal. So like, I don't care how much exercise you do. It's unlikely you're going to be sprinting out of that house to your car, getting your kit, and getting back to the dog in time to stop that
Or-
bleeding, as well as if the dog's ambulatory and they decide they're going to come with you, they're bleeding out that whole way.
Yeah.
So really having that stuff on you is the only way you're going to make a difference in that worst case scenario.
Well, that's some free advice right there for anybody listening, down the road. Yeah, that's Do you think that well, I guess, yeah, you already explained that. You said you've seen a positive impact in the sense that you've had people message you in circumstances where their dog was injured and whatever you had, enlightened them on that they were able to, um, save their
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah.
What's your next plan for, this? Obviously you've been kind of out of the picture for a minute with the surgery you had, but you're slated to go to a class here,
Yeah. I'm, uh, I'm booked up through November, and that's
oh
kind of the thing. I
shit.
keep getting asked for classes, and I'm trying to learn how to say like I can't, because again it goes back I think into that we were talking about, just
Yeah.
saying yes, like I'll figure it out, but I can't like even that with that veterinarian. I'm like, no, I know I'm painfully aware I can't train everybody because I have more
But
requests
you're
than I can possibly support.
okay, so let me ask you this then. With you saying that, you still revert back to that instance of, that go into that mindset where you're like, fast paced, full tempo, not sleeping, and what have you done, like in terms of, some therapy or sleep studies or, programs that you've been involved with through the VA or whatever organizations you've partaken with? Like, what are the steps that you've taken to kind of work on those issues you're struggling with?
No, no, I don't know. I think I've done a lot. So one thing I noticed, and I didn't really notice it till after I left and kind of slowed down a bit, is that like if I heard dogs whining or yelping out in pain, I would have like an automatic just adrenaline dump. Like heart rate skyrockets, I get sweaty, and that, I didn't same thing, didn't like recognize it at first. Kind of like, I don't know what's happening to me. Then found out it was kind of like that auditory trigger. If I hear, particularly a dog, and even to the point where I would hear it when it wasn't there, like with my ex-wife. I was in the shower. I was showering. I'm home. I've been home. I could have sworn I heard dogs yelping, like a dog yelping out really loudly. So I came barreling out of the shower, still soaked up, naked, and she was laying on the bed with our dog, with the dogs, just fine. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I did you not hear that?" She's like, "Hear what?" Like there was like there was a dog yelping in pain. And she's like, "No one's said any, there's no noise. I've just been reading. The dogs have been here. No one, like nothing happened." Um, so I started going into the behavioral health after that. I didn't find that the exposure therapy, I think, was that beneficial where you just like talk about the events kind of
Well,
thing.
I did prolonged exposure, and that was like where they would you like, okay, pick out a traumatic incident that you think is like most repetitive in causing stressors and triggers, and then like like sit there and repeat it, write it down, talk into a like record it on my phone, and then listen to it, and then go through like I don't know that if that's what you're talking about in the sense
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Like,
writing down like your 10 different stressors in certain areas and how high it gets at this and what brings you back down, like all these fucking different things. But yeah, that's
yeah, they did that, and I didn't I did it. I don't know. They always said to, and I think is that disassociation from having to like with that dog Aaron, like Aaron ended up dying, and then I had to cut them apart.
Right.
So I would talk about it, but I would kind of turn it into a medical report. Is a lot of the feedback I got. And then even I struggled because with some of the therapists, like they would switch out because I would tell some of these stories, and a lot of people love dogs. So I'd noticed that the therapist I was talking to, they start crying. And so I kind of immediately be like, I don't
Yeah, I can't.
like
Yeah.
this
Yeah. Yeah.
anymore. And they would. I mean, they were like, does me crying bother you? I'm like, I'm not. It just like just saying it.
I'm not here for
Like
your fucking therapy
like
session or
you
whatever.
can cry. I get it. Like you cry if you want to. I just it doesn't make me want to talk to you more. Like I'm not trying. I don't want to. I'm not trying to make you like tear up.
Right.
So I didn't find that super beneficial. So then I did ganglion nerve block, which was, I think, yeah, I think that there's because it's still kind of I think the jury's still out on that procedure. They like basically go in and inject lidocaine into the base, the ganglion nerve, stellate ganglion nerve in the base of your neck. And it's supposed to kind of reset that fight or flight response. It doesn't last forever. I remember I got like the best night of sleep. And that's what people repeat a lot is like the first couple nights after you get it's like the best night of sleep ever, just because you like that lidocaine is kind of reset.
Numbing and or whatever,
Yeah.
like knocking out the sensor.
Yeah. Kind of you're constantly like you're that parasympathetic response is already like always just waiting to kick off. Um, and then from Worthless Handler, who's another guy on the internet on Instagram. He's a law enforcement officer. He's a veteran. So he recommended EMDR. I think it's called EMDR therapy with like the vibrating lights and paddles. And so I started doing that. I still do that. And I think that's been some of the most beneficial like behavioral health therapy that I've done because through sleep studies and probably from some of the like TBI stuff with the eyes, I don't always get good REM sleep, and it may be because my eyes are kind of fucked up. So REM sleep, you really need to process a lot of that like emotion or trauma, and so the EMDR, I hope I'm saying the acronym right. I couldn't tell you what it stands for, but because you'll close your eyes and have these paddles that like vibrate in your hands. There's also lights. I do the vibrating one, and I notice for me at least, like my eyes end up going
Shifting
with the
towards,
paddles.
yeah.
So yeah, you're still doing the same kind of exposure therapy where I talk out loud about like an event or emotions or feelings, but I think you get some of that like tactile stimulation as well as for me that eye movement that it really does kind of like settle down that that kind of central nervous system response that usually causes anxiety or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I think that there's alternate ways out there that a lot of guys and gals, I'm bad about that. They've got the ability to utilize a lot of these programs now, whether it's through the VA, but you can get like outside help. There's definitely plenty of organizations out there that that's their entire purpose is finding veterans like these alternate sources of therapy, whether it be holistic or something that's not approved by the VA. So if somebody hears that and has been going through similar experiences or has dealt with similar experiences, and then hearing that you've got some positivity coming from that, that could lead them down a path to start working on that road to recovery and doing something better for themselves. So, I'm grateful that you're able to share that and have gone through it and, seen the things that have and have not worked, and you're willing to share that shit. What's your next step then? I mean, I know you said you're booked out till November, but is it just you and the dogs, or what's going on? You got a family, or
Yeah. No, it's me and my dog. She turns 12 actually. What's the day? The 27th?
today
So she
is
turns,
the 20, yeah, 27.
yeah, it is 27th. She turns 12 tomorrow. She's a Belgian Malinois. She comes with me pretty much everywhere. I live in a travel trailer. Right now it's parked in my buddy's driveway. He's a Marine veteran. He's a dog trainer. And so I'm probably, because I've been on the road kind of like that for the last year or ish.
I mean, dude,
A
that's
lot
a whole.
longer
I,
ago.
I I didn't even know that. That's a whole nother fucking story in itself. Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to. I know we've been going at it for a hot minute now, and you know, real quick, do you enjoy the lifestyle that you have and the way that you are traveling and be able to live?
I did. It was, I think I'm ready to kind of like settle back down again because
Okay.
there's a lot of, I just one of those things where I just went, like, I'm going to do this. But everything from seeking VA care or medical care that I need to, and like staying up, it is hard to kind of always be
Trans.
moving and like, because I just got back from North Carolina like 2 days ago. The one we were originally supposed to do that, I went to San Diego for, that was just for my little buddy's birthday party, but then the flight got moved. So it's, I'll be in this, and, every month I'm in two, three, four states at a time.
Jeez, that's
And
fucking
so
wild, dude. Sounds like you need to get like a home base and get set up with like Orion Training Group and be like their lead dog dude and have all the police departments that come in and train or something be
yeah,
their yeah, that'd be solid.
I think something, yeah, let's say so like something smarter because has been fun. It still is. Like I love teaching the classes. I love, like I'm looking forward to Pittsburgh next week. Seeing all the handlers I know and the relationships I've been privileged to develop post service. But yeah, just kind of recognizing that like not only do I not think I want to do this forever, that kind of travel, but I just can't. Like, there's no way to sustain it and also take
Right.
care of yourself. And I've done a lot better, through like exercise has been huge. There's a company called SumaFit that does a canine handler fitness program. And so they do the programming for a lot of law enforcement handlers, and I get to do that as well. Um, but yeah, just all those little things that, especially, when I was 25, I could eat an entire pizza, smoke a cigarette, do like pound one of those like giant BFC monster cans, and then go run around the
Yeah.
airfield, and it was fine. It was
Yeah.
no big deal.
Yeah.
Now, at 35, it's not like I'm old, but like
Oh,
if I don't take care of like your diet, health, or diet, exercise, sleep, all that stuff, just
yeah.
becomes so much more difficult,
It,
especially being on
and
the
harder
road.
to maintain down the road or down the line, not down the road, like down the line as you
Yeah,
get older, all that shit starts to slow down a little bit. Um,
yeah.
so Evan, you've given us a lot of insight on, or at least me, and I know that there's people out there that are going to find this impactful because it's not an everyday thing that you get to hear. Like you work with the dog handlers. Yes, we have our dog handlers, but being on that opposite side where you are the guy that the dogs are brought to if there's an issue, with packing them up and keeping them together to a higher level of care. And I mean, even in the sense of escorting, bodies, both human and canine. There's a lot of stuff to unpack. So I'm very grateful that you're able to share that with us. I do want to ask you, as being somebody that participated in the global war on terror, obviously joined up a few years afterwards, but participated in it for as long as you did, and at the multiple capacities. When you think of the GWAT, and like the things that you experienced through that, is there one word that comes to mind that describes that?
It's a good question. Um, I think if I had one word, the one word that pops up to mind, but I try not to, it would be bitter, a little bit bitter about it. And while like, to like maybe over explain, I don't question that all of us made a difference when we were there with what we were doing. But, I was right when my date of retirement was September 12th, 2021. And
Hmm.
so I was, like the day after the 20-year
No,
anniversary of the towers. And
yeah,
then seeing the withdrawal and seeing the way what everyone was told, what happened, um, at what point do does history kind of stop repeating itself? Or, I just like I'm proud of my service, proud of everyone, what we all did in the GWAT, I'm proud that we all like volunteered to go. But then you go from, I remember, part of you used to go to the movies, go to a movie theater, and they would have that epic like an army commercial, like with either Three Doors Down playing or the music. Like, so we were targeted as a demographic for service in a war that, you know, no one, and, at the end of the day, like maybe we all knew that, like, we all worked with the Afghans, we'd all spent time in Afghanistan. Maybe there wouldn't have been any other outcome, but just kind of feeling like it was really disingenuous from the people that created policy and strategy to the people that
Oh,
were enacting it.
yeah, seriously, dude. I mean, like the complete and total disconnect with what was trickling down from up here to this level down here. Um, Holy shit. Uh, like they were never, you'd get sometimes you get like a two-star general and whatever, they come in and they think that they know what's going on by getting like a small synopsis from, like a battalion commander. And, they're not at the patrol bases every single day. They're not outside the wire every single day. And, they just like, well, get us the results that we want. Um, and here we are now. But I like that bitter, especially through all the trials and tribulations and the fucking, knee-deep bullshit that you get through to get where we are today, and the baggage and the weight that's, on our shoulders and in our pack from the loss and the struggle and the rebound and all the therapy and work that you do to get where we are today. But um, a big thing that why I want to do this is to show the success that can be had after time in service with the things that you do can correlate in some form or fashion. Obviously, you had a niche um, MOS, and not a niche MOS, but like the it wasn't like, okay, like I've got some type of aircraft mechanic thing, or I'm a grunt that's gonna. It was like, you had kind of a pathway that wouldn't be accessible to most, like unless they had gone to veterinarian
Yeah.
school or something. But you took
Yeah.
that, and now you're being what I would assume is successful because you're booked up for basically an entire year. Um,
Yeah.
so I just like to show that through all the struggle and showing that resiliency to be able to bounce back from and asking for help to get you to where you got today, whether it be from your family or a nonprofit organization to help boost you into the position that you're in. So it's fucking awesome to see that you're doing what you love to do.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think what you're doing is awesome. I think that's a big thing is I am really lucky to take what I did at 14 years and like segue into this. But even if I stopped doing this or didn't have that opportunity, I think one thing I've learned more than anything is that the support from other veterans in particular is there and to use it like if you need it. So I always tell people, like I don't care if you don't know me, but if you're a veteran and you're struggling, if you need to call me or message me, like I will do my best to be there. And I think a lot of other veterans feel the same way.
Yeah,
And I
one,
think that is that one benefit, like maybe bitter about the way the war ended, but extremely grateful for we have each other, and that's not gonna like no one can take that away.
fuck, well, shit, you beat me to it. I was going to ask you for a little parting words of advice to the listeners, if there even end up being any. Who cares if you and I
Yeah,
are.
it's fine.
But no,
It's
I, I
just
I love talking with you, dude. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that last thing. Just like, being somebody that advocates for other veterans and willing to open up at least the ability to chat, and take it for what it is. But there's multiple resources out there, and there's multiple people that have the backs of like the whole "I got your six" thing, whatever. Yeah, it is what it is. But um, if you don't do anything about it, if you're not going to reach out, you're not going to be willing to chat with somebody about it, then I don't really know what people can do beyond that. If you hold it all in
yeah,
on yourself, I think everybody knows if you try to take all that in on your own, it makes things 10 times harder. I mean, 100 times harder. So,
yeah,
but
yeah. I think I mean that can happen because I have I would self isolate. I think a lot of us have that tendency. So you just have to look at it like anything else. Just you have to force yourself to do it if you can.
yeah, it's getting up and just putting one foot in front of the other
Yeah.
and keep pressing forward.
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, it's
It's
in
in the
it's in the
name.
name. It's in the name.
Yeah.
Kind of like Aunt Jemima. I'm kidding. But no, dude, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service. I'm thankful for the insight that you're able to give on, completely alternate experience in the military, and a cool fucking one at that. Like obviously was joking about your service being served you on a silver platter,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it seems like you had awesome opportunities, all
Oh,
these
yeah.
doors opened up. And another thing that I would say to any younger listeners, if there are any, that are thinking about that, like you were an advocate for yourself in the sense of like, I want to do this and asking about it and being open and working hard. So if you do that, it pays off and it gets you where you are today. And I hope nothing but the best for you. And obviously we stay in contact on Instagram. So I'm looking forward to see what the future brings for Evan Nolte and the dog medicine.
Thanks, man. You too.
So yeah, guys, great episode there. That was Evan Nolte, United States Army soldier, sorry, Staff Sergeant Paratrooper, and also dog medicine man or canine medicine man, the guru. Again, thank you for your time, thank you for your service, and I look forward to seeing you later, man.
You too. Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Take care.